Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump saying a deal with Iran could come this weekend. He's also criticizing 4 Republicans who voted to restrict his war powers. The White House says the vote is meaningless. The Hezbollah terrorist group is rejecting a U.S. brokered ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. The details of the agreement between the 3 nations. The Justice Department is announcing a major fraud crackdown in Ohio with 9 defendants charged in schemes totaling more than $42 million. The FBI is also launching a new most wanted fraudsters list. That story ahead. President Trump says he'll nominate Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche to permanently lead the Department of Justice. Blanche has served in the role since April and now faces state or Senate confirmation. The Federal Communications Commission moves to enhance oversight of undersea communications cables. Proposed rules would make it harder for Chinese companies to provide equipment. Western intelligence agencies are warning that China is increasingly targeting people online to gather sensitive information. The warning comes as a plea agreement hearing began today in a Virginia case involving an American journalist accused of acting on behalf of China. Today marks 37 years since the Tiananmen Square massacre. We look at some exclusive newly published photos as victims' families in China are barred from visiting graves and holding memorials.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. President Trump projecting optimism about a deal with Iran amid new flare-ups in the region. He's also pushing back on a symbolic move by a few Republicans to limit his war powers. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent, Iris Tao. Iris, good afternoon. What is the president saying about Iran?
Good afternoon to you as well, Don. So President Trump saying that a ceasefire with Iran is still in place despite recent flare-ups between the 2 countries in the region. The president also projecting new optimism, saying that a deal with Iran could come as early as this weekend, adding that they're very close now to coming to an agreement. Watch.
The negotiation itself has gone very well, actually. Very well.
Mr. President.
It could happen. I mean, if it happens, and it might not happen, who knows? But if it happens, it could happen like over the weekend.
Mr. President,
how do you define ceasefire?
Pretty much the way it is. It's a different part of the world. I'd say in that part of the world, ceasefire is when you're shooting in a more moderate manner.
On AI, Mr. President, yesterday you signed, Mr. President.
It's true. I mean, a ceasefire there is much different than a ceasefire in other parts of the world.
Meanwhile, on Wednesday, in a symbolic move to protest the ongoing war, 4 Republican lawmakers sided with Democrats to pass a resolution that attempted to limit the president's war powers in the war with Iran. Here's one of those Republicans speaking at the Capitol yesterday. Watch.
We have to follow the law. There's a law in the books. The War Powers Act of 73 says 48-hour notification and 60-day concurrence of Congress. We're past the 60 days. So you have 2 choices. You either follow the law or you change the law. You can't violate the law. That's not an option.
And President Trump now pushing back, saying in the new Truth Social post that the vote is meaningless, adding that the 4 Republicans who crossed the party line to vote with Democrats are grandstanders, saying that their actions are unpatriotic. President Trump also saying that these Republicans knows exactly where negotiations are standing with Iran and that they should be ashamed of their actions. House Speaker Mike Johnson also criticizing the move, saying that lawmakers should give the president latitude to finish ongoing peace negotiations. The House Speaker also adding that such a symbolic move will do no good to ongoing talks. Watch.
I think it is a very dangerous prospect to take away from the administration and the commander-in-chief right now the ability to negotiate. That's what this does. It weakens us, our position and our leverage in negotiation on the peace in that situation. Operation Epic Fury is concluded.
White House also reiterating the same point, saying that the war powers resolution is unconstitutional, adding that even if it's passed in the Senate, which White House officials say is unlikely, it will have no force or effect. Back to you.
And Iris, as well, the president is making an announcement this afternoon about coal and energy dominance. Can you tell us more about this?
Sure. So a White House official telling NTD today that the president is expected to unveil new support for America's coal industry. Specifically, he's rolling out a $700 million new investment to support them, including to build new coal power plants, as well as to boost coal exports. And now, of course, these new plants will be pretty rare in recent history, as they will be the first power plants built since 2013. Meanwhile, President Trump has been vowing to really boost America's energy industry to make sure that America is energy independent. Don.
All right, Iris, thank you. The Hezbollah terrorist group is rejecting a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. The U.S. brokered a temporary ceasefire deal in Washington, but the Iranian proxy says it won't stop attacking the Jewish state. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has the latest.
For the first time, all three parties are aligned in their determination to keep Iran's terror proxy, Hezbollah, out of the equation.
An Israeli spokesperson on Thursday praising a ceasefire reached between the U.S., Israel and Lebanon. The U.S. State Department announced the agreement on Wednesday after 2 days of U.S.-led talks in Washington.
The ceasefire is contingent on a complete cessation of Hezbollah fire and the evacuation of all Hezbollah operatives from the South Litani sector.
But Hezbollah on Thursday saying it won't withdraw from southern Lebanon and that it won't commit to stop fighting. The terrorist group says northern Israel won't be safe as long as Israeli forces attack Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Israel says it won't negotiate with Hezbollah any longer.
We're no longer going into a pattern of negotiating ceasefires where Israel leaves, Hezbollah comes back, and we go back to the same nonsense. This is stopped. Everybody understands that it has to stop.
Under the ceasefire, Hezbollah would have to withdraw from southern Lebanon and Lebanese troops would enter instead to guarantee peace. Arian Pasdar, NTD News.
President Trump is saying the U.S. is pretty close to signing a paper with Iran. Joining us now to discuss is David Wormser, analyst for Middle East Affairs at the Center for Security Policy. David, always great to see you. Good afternoon to you. So, we've been in a ceasefire with Iran for weeks now. How is the regime looking at the current situation? What's going through their leaders' minds? What's their calculus?
Well, their calculus is pretty complex. I'm talking about the Iranian regime's calculus. First of all, everything the president says of the pressures on Iran is correct. They lost the war, militarily devastated. They don't have a lot of military options per se, and their economy really is falling apart. But on the other hand, from the regime's perspective, they don't really care about the economy in their country too broadly. Their country is more of a stepping stone for their ideology. So if the country has to pay a price for them to maintain their ideology, they'll do so. And so the last dollar that goes into Iran will go to the Iranian people, it will go to the Iranian government, not to the Iranian people. The second thing is they see a second clock ticking, which is the oil storage facilities around the world are emptying out. And we're beginning to reach that point where if we don't start getting oil flowing through the Straits of Hormuz, there really is going to start being pressures on the international oil markets in a very real way, and that can start affecting the economies heading into the election. So the Iranians think that they just need to drag this out and normalize a certain level of violence and essentially make de facto facts on the ground. For example, that the Straits of Hormuz will only open when they decide it opens and that they will essentially control it. So they feel they have leverage here over the oil markets. They're also encouraged by some of the domestic pressures against President Trump here in the United States. They think that essentially the United States is running out of options other than going back to war, which they believe the United States is not willing to do at this point.
Okay, so here's my question then. If the Iranian regime leaders are thinking they have leverage because potentially global oil stocks are depleting, wouldn't the pressure be then on Iran because they're the ones who closed the Strait of Hormuz? So if the oil stocks are depleting and world economies are hurting, wouldn't that be more of an incentive for world economies to work with the U.S. against Iran?
If they felt that the United States then would that would break the Iranian regime's will. But I think they're realizing that the Iranian regime's will is not close to breaking yet. And as a result, if you need to solve this problem within 2 to 4 weeks, even war is getting to the last sort of days, the window for war, and solving it in time to start avoiding some of these major disruptions we're already entering the exit point of those windows. So essentially, they feel the only way, the international community, the only way to resolve this quickly and get to the economic rehabilitation of the world stockpiles and so forth is to get to an agreement immediately. So the pressure therefore then shifts from the Iranians to the United States, because the Iranians have made it clear they're not going to come to an agreement unless it's on their terms. So the world is trying to turn to the United States and say, listen, they're not going to give in, so you got to give in.
Okay, so is there any incentive right now for Iranian regime leaders to sign a deal with the U.S., agree to U.S. terms?
Well, there are some incentives. I mean, first of all, whether they believe it or not, the president is a very serious leader. And if he really gets frustrated and he feels there's no option, I would take very seriously his threats to return to war. The second thing is the Israelis are out there. The Israelis have sort of become our heavy in the region. And the Israelis are, at the moment, in the process of dismantling Hezbollah, despite the ceasefire. The ceasefire in Lebanon, there is no real ceasefire in Lebanon, and even this agreement is really between the Israeli government and the Lebanese government. Hezbollah has already said it's not going to be part of it, and the war continues. So Israel has mechanisms to also put pressure on Iran. And then ultimately they can say that their ideology matters and their country doesn't. But at the end of the day, that's 90 million people who are entering a very desperate state. If that's a volcano politically.
Okay, so at the end of the day, David, do you think we're closer to a deal right now in this point compared to the beginning of the ceasefire, or nothing has changed?
I think there's still major gaps. So I'm not seeing it as imminent as the president is indicating. I, of course, have no idea what's going on for real behind the scenes and what actual communications are. But the Iranian regime really has some firm red lines that they keep returning to, and they really are the red lines we cannot accept. So and they've actually added additional red lines. They've added that not only Hezbollah, but that Hamas now has to be included in the ceasefire, number one. Number two, they've also started saying that, for example, Bahrain has to allow the Shiites to operate freely politically inside Bahrain, which is, the Shiites have always been a lever for the Iranians to try to overthrow the Bahraini regime. So that's almost suicidal. They're almost demanding Bahrain commit suicide. So you're seeing the Iranians actually increasing their demands, not decreasing at this point. Again, behind the scenes, we don't know. But it doesn't look to me like we're really at the edge of an agreement.
Okay, so that may be the case, but here's what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in his testimony recently. He said he defines victory as destroying Iran's defense industrial base, reducing missile launchers, reducing stockpile drones, which the U.S. has done to a significant degree. So he says the U.S. has achieved all those. So, I mean, is it the case that even if we don't get a deal, even if the U.S. does not get a deal from Iran, by his definition, the U.S. has already won this? What is your analysis?
Well, right. I mean, we think the end of the war should be when there's a peace, and that's it. You can go home and you don't need to worry about this problem anymore. But if you look at it differently, that essentially we had a major problem, a cancer, so to speak, and we have now cut out the tumor, or at least the dangerous part of the tumor, and we can deal with the rest perhaps with chemotherapy or something like that. At this point, we have really taken down the Iranian threat to the region, Iranian threat to Israel, to the United States. We forget they were on the edge of developing missiles that were almost capable of hitting the United States. They had developed missiles capable of hitting all European cities. So we were really dealing with a very dangerous country that is much less so. However, one caveat: the Chinese government, the Russian government see the success of the Iranian regime surviving in bleeding and bogging down the United States to be a major strategic objective right now, because obviously it weakens America's position in the world and causes internal fissures in the United States and threatens the economy here. So for them, they want to keep us bogged down. So they are sending weapons and trying to break the blockade as much as possible overland through Pakistan, Turkmenistan, Turkey, Iraq, and so forth. So we are in a dynamic situation where we're playing chess, they're playing chess, and we must never forget that they, namely China, Russia, and Iran, and unfortunately also Turkey, are playing chess against us, and we can't ignore that.
Okay, on the blockade, I have a clip here from Rubio's testimony. He's saying the Iranian regime, like you said earlier, the economy is suffering. So let's just listen to this clip and then I'll have you react to it.
No one's begging for anything here. The Iranians might be begging because their economy is losing hundreds of millions of dollars a day. That they are losing. Understand, Iran had street protests going on before all of this started. All of those factors, economic factors in Iran, are far worse today than they were 6 months ago when those protests were happening. They have hyperinflation. Their currency is completely devalued. They're struggling to make payroll for their government workers. Iran is in a very serious situation. And if it was up to the political class there, and I understand everybody there is sort of radical in some way, but if it was up to the people that actually go to elections and wear the suits and you see on TV, they'd probably make a deal tomorrow. It's the issue they're facing is that the supreme leader and the IRGC Corps are a little bit more immune from those pressures until they can be convinced otherwise.
So, David, earlier you said the last dollar will go to the Iranian regime leaders before it goes to the people. My question to you is, how long can the supreme leader and the IRGC, as Rubio mentioned, how long can they stay immune?
Well, remember, this is a country that in one night or one two-night period killed 40,000 of its own people to stay in power. It's a country that's now imported tens of thousands of foreign fighters to suppress its people. It's a country that has bought and probably imported from allies like Russia and China technology and know-how in the last 2 months to know how to suppress their people. So at the end of the day, I think, unfortunately, unless there's foreign intervention, namely Israelis working on the ground clandestinely, the United States working on the ground clandestinely, arming the population, and perhaps kinetic application of various attacks, essentially, on Iranian regime targets, command and control targets, and suppression targets, for example, bases, police stations, checkpoints. Unless there's a long-term plan to engage in that on perhaps a lower level than major war. But I think the regime does have the will to kill, at least for the near future. The danger to the regime is that the more it's under pressure, it can kill enough people to stay in power. But these are violent people, and they may start killing each other too. And therefore, you might start seeing, the more you put these guys under a pressure cooker, they start lashing out at each other under stress. And that can lead to destabilization at the core of the regime. So the real name of the game is, at least this is the way the Israelis see it, this is the way UAE sees it, and I think President Trump sees it this way, that you need to put pressure over the long term on this regime, long term meaning the next months, year or so. And the regime's dynamics are not very healthy. And at that point, what happens on the street can be very important, because somebody from within the regime may try to tap the street against his fellow mafia leaders in the regime to overpower them. And then you see chaos.
Okay, so in that clip, Rubio also said the regime is losing, the economy is losing hundreds of millions of dollars a day. How long would it take for the leaders to feel that economic pain in their daily lives?
It will probably take weeks and months. I don't believe that it's something that for them, it will take a very short period. The Iranian people feel it already. The factories were destroyed in the war. They've lost their jobs. Nobody's coming to rebuild those factories. People are unemployed. People don't have income. The Iranians are already choking to death. But the leadership at this point has enough funds, has enough money. Unfortunately, some of our allies were facilitating transfers of payment on loans and so forth. Qatar, for example, they're selling stuff across the land borders and probably getting payments for it, so forth. So my sense is the regime does have some time on its hands still. It can hold out for another few months.
Okay, so Trump's demands are the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, enriched uranium out of Iran, and of course, no nuclear weapons. And Trump yesterday said maybe getting the uranium, enriched uranium, maybe overrated. He said he may have overrated that. So if we take that out, there's two things: no nuclear and the opening of Strait of Hormuz. Do you think the U.S. military has the ability to, if Iran does not agree to open it, has the ability to forcefully open it?
I'm certain the U.S. Navy has the ability to do so. You have to remember, CENTCOM came only into existence in the last decades. Before that, it was called the Rapid Deployment Force, which came out of the 1979 Iranian Revolution. And the purpose of the Rapid Deployment Force, and therefore the mission of the U.S. Navy, was to keep the Straits of Hormuz open. That was the primary mission for the very creation of CENTCOM. I am certain that the military has options and has contingencies on how to do it. The question is political. What sort of forces are we willing to commit? What sort of actions is the political leadership of our country willing to commit to? But I'm sure that if turned to the military and said, you need to come up with an option for us with minimal casualties or no casualties to reopen the Straits of Hormuz, even if it involves maybe them sending missiles onto Israel, onto so on and so forth. If you need to do it, can you do it? The Navy and the CENTCOM will probably, I'm sure they have a plan to do so.
Okay, just one final question here, David. How are we doing on no nuclear, the final red line of President Trump? And do you think, what is the likelihood in your mind that military operations will resume?
Well, no nuclear, first of all. I think the Iranians have committed to that over and over again, and they've been caught lying about that over and over again. So the verbal commitment really is meaningless. The supposed nuclear fatwa, the religious edict against nuclear weapons, is also very highly questionable whether it even exists. And even if it exists, it's not sure that it means much. So I don't take anything they say. So I think the president's actually right. The highly enriched uranium, it's very worrisome because you can convert that into a bomb. It's much harder than bomb-grade material, which is 90%. But technically, you can do it with 60, but it's very difficult and very low grade. The bigger problem really is the know-how and the structures of enrichment. So the whole uranium pipeline to enrichment, in my view, is even more important than the highly enriched uranium, because you can go from low enriched uranium to 90% very quickly if you have the centrifuges and they know how to do it. The second thing is there's the plutonium route, the heavy wet water reactor, and that can produce, if it goes online, can produce a tremendous amount of plutonium, different route to a bomb than the centrifuges and uranium. You go straight to a plutonium bomb. But the amount of bombs that Iran could suddenly produce, 20 to 40 a year, based on that track, are very dangerous. So really, when you're dealing with the nuclear issue, the president's right. I think the HEU, the highly enriched uranium, is a little overrated. I wouldn't give up on it. I don't know if that's what he means by overrated, that we can live with it. But I think the entirety of the whole pipeline of the nuclear program is really dangerous, and it has to be eliminated in its entirety. And that was, by the way, our negotiating position going into the war. So anything short of that would involve a concession on our part.
Okay, well, David, we always have such engaging conversations. Thank you for your time today.
Sure.
The Justice Department is charging 9 defendants in Ohio for more than $42 million in fraud. The FBI is also unveiling a brand new most wanted fraudsters list. We have more news when we come back. Don't go away.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, MyPillow mattresses and MyPillow mattress toppers as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets. Regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard MyPillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, please listen closely. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. It's a rate lock for your life insurance that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. Many policies you see don't have one, but you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. This plan was designed for people on a fixed income with coverage options that start at $9.95 a month. That's less than 35 cents a day. Your rate is locked in for life. Coverage can never be canceled, and your acceptance is guaranteed. You cannot be turned down because of your health. See for yourself. Call for an information kit and gift. Both are free with no obligation.
Call 1-800-624-6556 for your free information and your free gift. That's 1-800-624-6556. 1-800-624-6556. Call now.
Is deep-sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritan Green Vegetable Omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritan Green Vegetable Omega-3. Eat 2 a day and you'll feel brand new.
In the Design Studio by Mathis Home, when our suppliers offer us special discounts, we pass the savings on to you. Since we're one of the top Bernhardt dealers in the country, right now you can save an extra 20% off our everyday low prices line-wide, even custom orders. Choose from the nation's largest in-stock selection of Bernhardt at the lowest prices. Plus, enjoy complimentary delivery and design services. Don't miss your chance to save an extra 20% on Bernhardt at the Design Studio by Mathis Home.
President Trump says he will nominate Todd Blanche to permanently serve as Attorney General after months in the acting role. Trump advisor Dan Scavino posted a video on X of Trump announcing the decision at the dinner in the Rose Garden yesterday.
He's acting Attorney General. Tomorrow I'm instructing Dan and everybody else that's involved in that very complicated process, which is going to go, I think, very quickly, that we are going to make him permanent Attorney General.
The president praising Blanche as a respected legal mind and signaling confidence in his leadership at the Justice Department. Blanche has served as acting attorney general since April after Pam Bondi stepped down. Before taking the top role, Blanche served as deputy attorney general and oversaw immigration enforcement operations and the release of the Epstein files. Blanche also previously represented President Trump during his 2024 New York criminal trial and defended several high-profile Trump allies. The nomination heads to the Senate, where Blanche was previously confirmed as Deputy Attorney General in a mostly party-line vote. The Justice Department announces several indictments against alleged big-time fraudsters in Ohio, as well as a new FBI most wanted list for fraudsters.
The days of the brazen theft that we've seen of taxpayer dollars, abusing the generosity of the American taxpayer is over.
It is live officially on the FBI website. I want all Americans to take a look at these most wanted individuals and look at the amounts, the tens of millions and billions of dollars in fraud that they have decimated our societies from. We rely on you. Our best form of information is the American public.
Todd Blanche says 14 individuals have been charged in Ohio who allegedly were involved in fraud schemes amounting to over $50 million, as well as indictments for 2 Ohio state employees who allegedly billed the government for $30 million in fraudulent therapeutic behavioral services. And as Kash Patel says, the new top 10 most wanted list of fraudsters is live at FBI.gov. He says there is no bad piece of information and urges Americans to call if they think they can help. Today marks the 37th anniversary of the June 4th Tiananmen Square massacre. Chinese troops used tanks and machine guns to crush pro-democracy demonstrations, killing thousands of people. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports on the commemorations, including a newly released archive of exclusive photographs shedding light on a chapter of history of the Chinese Communist Party has long sought to erase.
For 37 years, the CCP has suppressed the truth, labeling the Tiananmen Square protests a counter-revolutionary riot. The newly uncovered photo archive was captured by an official photographer who witnessed the events firsthand. Before his passing, he entrusted the long-hidden film to the Epoch Times for public release. They comprise over 2,000 color and black and white photos. Fulfilling the photographer's final wish, the Epoch Times is publishing the images in installments to honor the victims and remind the world of the regime's atrocities. In response to the release, CCP authorities have reportedly begun harassing and threatening individuals suspected of involvement, including both Chinese and U.S. citizens. Around the world, commemorations are being held in remembrance of those who lost their lives. The Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation is holding a candlelight vigil in Washington, D.C. to honor those killed during the massacre. Other events are being held in Germany, Taiwan, and Canada. Human Rights Watch reports that similar events are planned in more than 30 cities across 7 countries. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the world remembers those who gathered to demand democratic reforms and accountability, adding that no amount of censorship can erase the past. But efforts to suppress remembrance continue in both mainland China and Hong Kong. A performance artist in Hong Kong yesterday tried to honor the victims of the brutal repression, but was quickly stopped by police. The latest sign of the city's shrinking freedom of expression. Hong Kong was for decades the only place in China where a large-scale public commemoration of the massacre was held. And China is barring relatives of victims of the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre from visiting their loved ones' graves on the anniversary. Amnesty International called the move heartless and said it reflects an escalating effort to suppress the remembrance of the fateful day. The Tiananmen Mothers Group says it's the first time in more than 3 decades authorities have prevented members from visiting their loved ones' graves and holding their annual memorial at Beijing's Wan'an Cemetery. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Public commemorations of the Tiananmen Square crackdown are taking place in overseas cities. Lit candles lined the windows of the U.S. consulate in Hong Kong. That happened as Hong Kong police stepped up security to prevent any commemoration at or near a park where a massive candlelight vigil lit up the night every year until a clampdown following major pro-democracy protests in 2019. Writing on his Facebook page, Taiwan President Lai Ching-te said a truly great country should not, quote, blindly believe in military might or engage in militarism. He added, quote, I sincerely hope that China can face up to the June 4th incident of 37 years ago, acknowledge the truth, soothe the pain, and open the door to reconciliation and dialogue. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Beijing's censorship could not erase memories of the military assault during the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989. Joining us now to discuss is Casey Fleming, Chairman and CEO of Black Ops Partners Corporations. He's also the author of the new book, The Red Tsunami, The Silent Storm Killing Your Freedom. So Casey, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. In your view, just explain for us, why is it important that we keep remembering this day?
Well, we have to understand it's really communism versus freedom. And this is how the Chinese Communist Party takes and manages complete control over a population with ultimate brute force and murder. The number that they murdered was over 10,000. We know that to be true. And they've done everything they can, the Chinese Communist Party, to suppress that information from coming out in the media. There's a lot of clips that are coming out that have been recently pulled out of the archives that have been stored for many, many years. But You have to understand, communism and freedom do not match. They do not work. It's oil and water, and they are ultimate enemies of freedom. So when anybody talks about democracy and freedom in China or Hong Kong, they are severely reprimanded. They're targeted, and some of them are actually murdered, even still today.
So I'm not an expert on the CCP, but from what you're saying, I gather the CCP saw the protests in 1989 as a threat to the stability of the country and its power. Is that right?
That's exactly right. They've got to make, communism says you have to maintain total power and control over the population. And if anybody speaks up that against the regime and communism, then they must be put down either through re-education, which is, quote, torture, re-education, those type of things, even murder, to set an example. It has to be put down because it renders the power null and void. So they've got to keep that total power and control over the population. And the population cannot be allowed to speak freely. Freedom of speech is definitely not available, and it's shut down at any cost inside of China.
So why does the CCP to this day try to suppress information on this? You know, Taiwan's Lai Ching-te said, told Beijing to acknowledge the events of 1989. I mean, what purpose does this serve? Because we already know what happened in 1989. How does controlling the narrative now benefit or serve the regime?
Because they hope time will make people forget, and bringing it up every year, and especially on this anniversary, doesn't let people forget. And it's a complete threat to their totalitarian control over the country and all Chinese folks around the world, because the Chinese Communist Party believes that, even though you've left China and you are living now in the UK or Canada or the US, you're still part of the mother country, and you're still aligned, and you must be loyal to the Chinese Communist Party. But having people talk about democracy in China renders the totalitarian regime, obsolete and null and void, and they can't have that when they demand, and their regime must have total control over the population.
Okay, Casey, let me have you respond to a statement by the Chinese Foreign Ministry. So this was in response to what Rubio said, and in response to what Lai Ching-te said of Taiwan. And the statement is that Beijing had long reached a conclusion about the political turmoil that occurred in the late 1980s. What do you say to this statement?
That they're just rewriting history. They want people to forget, and they want to continue to paint the picture that China and the CCP are a friendly nation, a peaceful nation, and they're behind their people and so on. So they try to, it's propaganda is what it is, because they're trying to rewrite history, because history is what defines the Chinese Communist Party. And, your audience needs to understand that the Chinese Communist Party murdered more of their own people, yes, murdered, and they still do today, than twice, double all other communist regimes combined. So let that sink in. They also still do forced human organ transplants even today, where you can order organs, fly to China, and say, look, I need a new kidney, I need a new heart, I need a new lung. You can show up 2 weeks later, you get a new one installed, and you just pay for it. So the point is, the mentality, you're dealing with the mentality of a dark and diabolical regime. That's what they are on their face.
Has there been any accountability at all, not just for 1989, but what you just mentioned right now, organ harvesting?
No accountability. In fact, they've kind of taken over the UN, the WHO, all these organizations that the US used to drive in the past. They've taken those over today, so these entities can't hold them accountable. So it's very methodical. The world is at war. This is just not a snapshot today, June 4th, and the anniversary of Tiananmen Square. This is also a severe commentary of where the world sits today. The Chinese Communist Party are extremely successful in this thing called soft power and unrestricted war. And that's what's really going on. And thank goodness for today, because we get to remember the Chinese Communist Party for who they really are.
Yeah, and President Trump as well said yesterday in a Truth Social post that communism always leads to violence, poverty, crime, death, and destruction. What is your comment on this? Have we seen what have we learned about history, about communism, and how it plays out? Does it always lead to what President Trump has said? Are there any exceptions?
First of all, President Trump is accurate in his statement. It has never led to success. 100% of the time that communism has been deployed in the world has failed, and it always results for 95%, 98% of the population in despair, crime, very low quality of life, and so on. And some of the people that have been through communism, like the Cubans, the Venezuelans, they'll tell you, we never want to go back. In fact, they're some of the strongest freedom fighters in the United States and the free world today, because they saw what communism is. Communism is total control, and all the power and all the riches go to the very, very few elite, and everyone else is in poverty or dead.
Okay, Casey, just one final question here. You said earlier there has been no accountability, and of course, you have done a lot of work as well trying to expose the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party. What gives you hope? What gives you hope that there is light at the end of the tunnel with regards to what China is doing and anything else related to communism in this world?
Well, freedom and liberty are oil and water with communism. They can never match. And freedom and liberty and the American people are a total threat to the power of the Chinese Communist Party and for them to stay in power. The message to the American people is all of this has reached a crescendo. It is, the Chinese Communist Party has never been so powerful in the world. They're ultimately very powerful now in the world in their soft power. Economically, they're hurting, but don't forget, that's a communist economy where every last yuan can be driven towards war and defending the Chinese Communist Party. The message to the audience and the American people is your enemy doesn't want you to become informed. That's why there's the book, The Red Tsunami. They don't want you to unite and take action. And that's why there's a movement called freedomforever.global. And that every American needs to stand up. The first thing everybody needs to do is stop buying Chinese goods and services and stop paying for these basic criminals to be in power and to harm their own population and the rest of the world, by the way.
Yeah, and on that point alone, I think the American people as a whole has a lot of power, because you're talking about not buying stuff from China. If every single American in the United States did that, that would be tremendous leverage against the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, Casey, pleasure to...
Yeah.
Yes, go. If you had a final comment.
Our government is corrupted, and people don't realize that spending, they have a lot of power in their spending ability. They vote every day with their wallets several times a day. And what I am pleading with everyone is stop buying Chinese goods and services and stop investing in companies that do business with China.
Okay, very significant advice, very good advice. Thank you, Casey. Pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.
The FCC proposes new rules for the undersea cables that carry nearly all international internet traffic. The move aims to curb Chinese involvement and strengthen national security. More news after this break.
We said we'd never give in to a meltdown.
Okay.
And we'd never babysit with a screen. We said we'd never let the toys take over.
Mariella!
Never leave the house looking, well, and never let them out of our sight. Cars get hot fast, and kids can be at risk. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
My mom and dad were traditional Asian parents. Now my father would go to work before I woke up in the morning, and then he would come home too tired to play with me. I tell my son, I love you every single day. Now my dad has never said that to me. Not because he doesn't love me, but because culturally it wasn't comfortable for him. So I teased him the other day and I said, how come you never say that to me? And he said, you're too old now. Now that he's a grandfather, he says, I love you to my son every time he sees him. My advice to all the fathers out there, forget the material things, forget the cultural restrictions. They grow up way too fast for you to waste even a single precious minute or moment.
Say bye-bye. Bye-bye.
During high school, I hung with the wrong crowd and I never graduated.
I helped Santiago in many different ways, like all fathers do, because he always wanted to go to college.
I felt a little embarrassed to come back to school, but eventually, once I came here, I knew that it's for a bigger goal.
He was very dedicated, hardworking. He connected with his teachers, he connected with other students. That was one of the key reasons why he was able to keep forging ahead.
It was amazing to see him graduate. This was one thing that meant so much to him, and of course, it meant so much to us too.
With the help of my father and having my son, that was all the motivation that I needed. That support is everything.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Results are still coming in for the California primaries. Voters are reshaping the race to replace Governor Gavin Newsom. Republican Steve Hilton and Democrat Javier Becerra emerging as the frontrunners in the state's open primary. The results could set up a high-profile battle in November over the direction of the nation's largest state economy. With more than half the votes counted, Hilton leading the field with nearly 28%, while former Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra following close behind. Under California's open primary system, the top two finishers advanced to the general election regardless of party affiliation. The crowded race featured more than 60 candidates competing to succeed the term-limited Gavin Newsom. Becerra focusing heavily on defending California policies against the Trump administration and expanding health care access. Hilton campaigning on cutting taxes, reducing regulations, and tackling California's affordability crisis. Hilton saying yesterday he received a message of congratulations from President Trump.
Obviously, we're very encouraged by these results. Nothing is final yet, but it does look as if change is coming to California. And that is good news for everyone, every small business, every working family, everyone who wants to see our state set back on track. As I've said, I think it's going to be very helpful for Californians to have a governor who has a good working relationship with the president and his team. And I would say that regardless of who the president was and which political party they represent.
California's next governor will inherit major challenges, including housing shortages, homelessness, wildfire risks, and a projected multi-billion-dollar budget deficit. Meanwhile, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass advancing to the general election, where she may face Spencer Pratt, who is now in second place. Votes are still being counted in that race. San Francisco's heavily Democratic 11th congressional district, long represented by former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, also drawing attention. Democratic State Senator Scott Weiner and San Francisco Supervisor Connie Chan, endorsed by Pelosi, advancing from the primary. Final results across state races may still take days as California continues to count mail-in ballots. The Federal Communications Commission is moving to enhance oversight of undersea communications cables that handle 99% of international internet traffic. Proposed rules will make it more difficult for Chinese companies to provide equipment, while fast-tracking approvals for U.S. tech companies. The FCC said it was planning to require licenses for undersea line terminal operators for the first time. The components are critical to connecting undersea systems to U.S. land facilities. American tech companies seeking quicker approval, including Facebook parent Meta and Alphabet's Google, would be required to guard against espionage and other security threats. Operators would also have to agree not to use foreign equipment that could pose security risks. Last year, the FCC banned equipment and services from companies on a national security threat list. Huawei, ZTE, China Telecom, and China Mobile were among the banned companies. U.S. intelligence agencies and its closest allies issuing a warning about Chinese espionage efforts online. The alert comes as federal prosecutors pursue a case against an American journalist accused of acting as an unregistered agent for China. NTD's Arlene Richards reports.
Intelligence agencies from the United States and its closest allies are warning that Chinese intelligence services are increasingly using fake recruiters and online job offers to target people with access to sensitive information. The warning comes as federal prosecutors pursue a Virginia case involving journalist Thomas Pauken II, who is scheduled to appear in court Thursday for a plea agreement hearing on allegations that he acted as an unregistered agent for China. According to court documents, prosecutors allege that Pauken worked with individuals linked to China's intelligence apparatus and sought to obtain information from a U.S. government employee. Authorities say he prepared reports for Chinese contacts and attempted to cultivate access to government information. Investigators claim Pauken confessed during voluntary FBI interviews that his activities formed part of a conspiracy to obtain classified information from the United States government. The Joint Security Bulletin warns that Chinese intelligence officers increasingly pose as recruiters, consultants, or researchers online, offering paid assignments that can gradually evolve into requests for sensitive or classified information. Targets include military personnel, government employees, think tank researchers, academics, and journalists. Officials say the warning reflects growing concern that China is combining traditional human intelligence operations with online recruitment tactics to obtain political, military, and economic information from Western countries. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Brace yourself for travel disruptions this summer. American Airlines is temporarily suspending some of its routes due to steep jet fuel costs. In a statement, American says it adjusted service for select routes in August and September, and that impacted travelers would be offered alternative arrangements or refunds. CBS reports that the afflicted routes include LA to Washington Dulles, Cleveland, Ohio, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The airline says it's not cutting any of its routes indefinitely. Airlines around the world have canceled flights and suspended routes due to steep jet fuel costs. Many are also hiking fees or cutting their perks in efforts to save money. Jet fuel costs can account for almost about 30% of an airline's total expenses. They have soared some 40% since the start of the Iran war. The Strait of Hormuz, a key waterway for the world's flow of oil, remains effectively closed to traffic. Now, moving on to sports. Hockey, the Stanley Cup Finals continue tonight as the Vegas Golden Knights take on the California Hurricanes in Game 2. Vegas leads the series 1-0 after edging out the Hurricanes 5-4 in Game 1 Tuesday night in Raleigh. Tonight, the puck drops again at PMC Arena with Carolina looking to even things up on home ice. The Hurricanes enter as slight favorites tonight and will look up to clean up mistakes that left Vegas put up 5 goals in Game 1. Game 2 gets underway tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern. The House Foreign Affairs Committee is holding a hearing on China's role in the fentanyl crisis. Lawmakers are hearing testimony from experts on the Chinese Communist Party's alleged links to precursor chemicals, money laundering networks, and the flow of fentanyl into the United States. Let's listen in.
A research fellow for China and national security at the Heritage Foundation. The views I express today are entirely my own and do not reflect the views or positions of the Heritage Foundation. I deeply appreciate the subcommittee leadership for inviting me to testify on this urgent issue of both national policy and profound personal importance. For nearly 4 decades, I have worked on U.S. national security policy and challenges posed by the People's Republic of China. Never did I imagine that one of these policy challenges would strike my own family so directly. In October of 2023, our family joined the growing circle of American families devastated by fentanyl. Our daughter, Christina Marie, was just shy of her 25th birthday when she ingested an off-market Xanax laced with fentanyl. From the trauma center to the intensive care unit to then hospice, we spent 12 agonizing days fighting to save her. Ultimately, we had to accept her loss and the hole it left in our lives. In 2026, there is no other issue in no other country that touches the heart of families in every single congressional district represented in this House. I thank you for making this a priority and discussing the full range of tools needed to provide for the common defense for our nation and our families. The questions framing the hearing today are essential. What is China's role in the synthetic opioid supply chain? What is Beijing's diplomatic strategy for dealing with this? And what can the United States do to sharpen our strategy and tools to reduce the flow? Before I dive in, I want to note an important context from my colleagues at the Heritage Foundation. In their 2024 backgrounder, they made clear at the heart of this crisis is a global partnership between America's top geopolitical adversary and the transnational criminal organizations. Chinese precursor chemicals form the backbone of the supply chain killing Americans. Since then, America has taken several important steps. An executive order designating cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada explicitly tied to fentanyl flows, the Halt Fentanyl Act that permanently scheduled fentanyl analogs, enhanced Treasury sanctions on Mexican banks, Chinese chemical networks, and an executive order designating illicit fentanyl and precursors as weapons of mass destruction. On the PRC side, they have responded with some actions, releasing a white paper, scheduling additional precursors, announcing export licensing controls, and holding bilateral meetings. Yet despite these steps, the PRC remains the primary global source of precursors and pill pressing equipment for the Mexican cartels. China's role in the supply chain is central and ongoing. Chinese precursor chemicals continue to flow to Mexican cartels. Beyond chemicals, Chinese money laundering organizations play a critical role in moving cartel proceeds back to Mexico. Beijing's diplomatic strategy has consistently been one of minimum effort. For years, Chinese officials claimed they lacked information or control, asking the United States for detailed intelligence. This is difficult to accept in the world's most sophisticated surveillance state. In public diplomacy, at times they accuse Americans for blaming China to hide from our own domestic problems. Despite promises made to multiple U.S. presidents, the PRC has not taken strategically significant steps to verifiably stop the flow. This is a choice, not a coincidence. In a country that tightly controls less sensitive matters, they are doing just enough to deflect stronger pressure, while signaling this is not a real priority for them or for us. To achieve meaningful change, the United States must target China's strategic vulnerabilities: access to the American consumer market, access to U.S. financial system, and access to imported energy. The tariffs and sanctions issued in 2025 proved effective in bringing China to the table. Congress should consider legislation to refine and strengthen these tools for the fentanyl fight. With the designation of fentanyl precursors as weapons of mass destruction, we should fully utilize the broad legal, financial, and operational authorities this provides. We should also explore leverage through China's energy dependence, including potential taxes on energy purchases that could fund enforcement and treatment of victims. Finally, we must dramatically reduce America's dependence on China's pharmaceutical supply chains. Our reliance on China for legitimate medicines creates the very infrastructure that enables the illicit trade. Reshoring and diversifying production will both protect public health and create genuine leverage to demand action on the illicit side. This crisis has claimed the lives of over 500,000 Americans in the last decade. It's not simply a drug issue, it's a national security emergency. I thank you for the honor to testify today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Yates. Now, Ms. Liu, I would like to recognize you for your opening statement.
Chairwoman Kim, Ranking Member Berra, and members of the subcommittee, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify. I'm Zongyuan Zoe Liu. I'm the Maurice R. Greenberg Senior Fellow for China Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. CFR does not take any institutional position. The views here today are my own. Every overdose death is a family tragedy. Overdose deaths fell sharply in 2024, and according to provisional federal data, the decline consistent in 2025. But there are 70,000 Americans still died. That is progress, not victory. The death tolls have fallen, but the supply chain that make illicit fentanyl easy to scale remain adaptive and cross-border. The point is not that China created American demand. The problem is that China-linked chemical, logistics, and financial networks help make illicit fentanyl easier to produce, cheaper to scale, and harder to stop. The key shift came in 2019. China imposed class-wide controls of fentanyl-related substances rather than chasing individual analogs one by one. That made direct finished fentanyl export from China harder, but it pushed the risk upstream towards fentanyl precursors and the commercial and financial ecosystem around them. That shift changed the policy problem. Precursor control is not like stopping finished narcotics. Many chemicals have legitimate use and move through commercial channels. Traffickers do not rely on one fixed recipe. When one precursor is controlled, they can shift to another input, another synthetic route, or another synthetic opiate. Congress, therefore, needs adaptive enforcement, not static checklist. A senior State Department official has publicly stated that the United States has no evidence Beijing deliberately directs illicit drug shipment into the United States. That distinction matters. But the problem is not proven central direction. It is a serious supply chain governance failure in China. China has not consistently policed the illicit edges of its chemical, online, logistics, and financial systems. The question then is how the United States can turn that responsibility into measurable Chinese measures. So the Biden administration and the Trump administration used different tools, but not on separate tracks. Biden rebuilt the counter-narcotic channel after San Francisco, giving Washington a way to press Beijing on chemicals and enforcement. But that channel had a limited time to prove durable result. Trump added leverage through tariffs and trade bargaining, which elevated urgency and may have accelerated visible Chinese steps. But pressure alone cannot identify suppliers, brokers, shippers, or money launderers. The lesson is that channels and leverage must work together. Diplomacy must produce enforcement, and pressure must be tied to implementation. My written testimony provided 8 recommendations, but for the time available, I'll focus on 3 congressional levers: oversight, multilateral enforcement, and financial disruption. First, Congress should require regular interagency reporting on proof of reinforcement, not just proof of announcement. When Beijing adds chemical controls, Congress should ask whether those controls have changed behavior. Did they block shipments, shut down bad actors, remove online vendors, and disrupt payments? Second, Congress should fund multilateral enforcement, not just bilateral pressure. Because the supply chain crosses borders, pressure on Beijing will work best when it is connected to a standing operational channel among the United States, Mexico, Canada, and China. Third, Congress should follow the money. FinCEN reported about $1.4 billion in suspicious fentanyl-related transactions in 2024. Anti-money laundering enforcement should be central to fentanyl enforcement, especially where high-risk chemical suppliers, buyers, and payment channels intersect. Congress should insist not on promises from Beijing, but on measurable disruption of the networks that make illicit fentanyl scalable. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you to all 3 witnesses for your very comprehensive testimony. I think there were very good recommendations also for Congress as well. Let's dive into those. In my first, I'll give myself 5 minutes of questioning too. First, on the topic of illicit financing caused the fentanyl crisis. China isn't just creating the precursor compounds at the heart of the fentanyl trade. PRC entities have also become the go-to money launderers of choice for the cartels. China has done nothing to stop that, though. And we talked about that. You also mentioned that in your testimony. So, Mr. Yates, why hasn't the PRC government cracked down on domestic criminals that undertake these activities?
Well, I think that the short answer to that has to be because it doesn't matter enough to them. They don't stand to lose enough in lack of enforcement. We have taken all of the pain, and they have taken all the patience. I think that going for the finances is vital. In the post 9/11 environment, when we were looking at counterterrorism strategy, going after finances was one of the key tools put in place. And that's why I think the labeling of illicit fentanyl precursors as WMD opens up a range of tools that should be used. They can be used as leverage at different points. It was used as leverage in the North Korean negotiations to try to push back on their nuclear weapons program. We designated 2 Chinese banking entities as primary money laundering concerns. That struck enough of a dependency chord that China brought North Korea to the negotiating table. Leaving aside where those negotiations went, it proved that leverage can work to force a conversation. It also proved that it mattered enough to us to use what is essentially a financial nuclear weapon. That, I think, is what we feel like we have faced, and they don't feel like they have had to face that. Now, when it comes to can they find things in their own country, again, this is the most modern tech advanced surveillance state known to mankind. They can find images of Winnie the Pooh on a protester in Hong Kong. They can find these things. This is 100% an issue of will, and have we made it cost them enough to have to do these things in a verifiable way? They have designated a handful of people and a few companies. We lost 500,000 lives. Those 6 people and those few companies couldn't have been responsible for it alone.
Thank you. You know, the Department of Justice in March indicted citizens and 2 PRC-based pharma companies for their involvement in the fentanyl trade. China, however, have not taken any legal action against those citizens or companies and continues to fuel that crisis. So, Mr. Luckey, can you talk about how the United States can carry out legitimate law enforcement actions against fentanyl smugglers without PRC government?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. First, I would suggest designating money laundering networks as strategic corruption infrastructure using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Second, I would recommend establishing a review body for money laundering linked trade based on or similar to the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. Leverage economic statecraft to pressure China to cooperate. Conduct cyber-enabled disruption of money laundering organization infrastructure. Explore alternative mechanisms to the yuan to dollar conversion to displace demand for illegal funds. And finally, tailoring cryptocurrency tracing and enhanced analytical capabilities to counter the illegal financing of the transnational criminal organizations.
Thank you. You know, last year, Treasury Department sanctioned multiple PRC firms and drug traffickers for their role in the fentanyl supply chain. Actions like these communicate clearly to Beijing that synthetic opioids are weapons of mass destruction and they must be treated as such. So I want to ask both of you, Mr. Yates, first, can you describe to us the role that sanctions are playing in punishing and enforcing against fentanyl traffickers? And Mr. Luckey, what would happen if the discretionary sanctions from the Fentanyl Sanctions Act were to expire? We don't have much time, so if you can be succinct, please.
Very briefly, if it's the broad scope designation of primary money laundering concern, those entities can no longer access the U.S. financial market. It is one of the big 3 dependencies that China has. They can't function without access to U.S. dollars in our financial system. And so that designation opens up a whole different level of priority for them to engage. The targeted ones at companies and individuals, it's an important signal, but oftentimes what it results in is like when you turn the lights on or off in a room, cockroaches go to a different room. And so it's an endless effort to go after those.
Okay. Mr. Yates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In addition to just renewing those sanctions, I would recommend strengthening the sanctions and forcing the sanctions, tie those sanctions to enforcement of efforts that the Chinese claim they're making. Let's force China to take action on these by enforcing the rules that they claim they have in place.
Thank you very much. I now recognize Ranking Member Bera for your 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Complicated and very difficult challenge because a lot of these precursors are used for legitimate purposes as well and then can be used illicitly. I agree with all of you that, follow the money, disrupt the money, go after the criminals. and then use the tools that we have to hold the Chinese accountable for addressing those individuals. Ms. Liu, you talked about a reduction in the number of overdose deaths. One death is still one too many, as we all point out. I think it's my understanding that we are starting to see an increased impact in Europe, in Australia, and other parts of the world. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, but so far we do not really have concrete evidence directly connected to causality.
Okay. And as we increase the penalties and we go after the criminals or we go after the cartels, I guess to either Mr. Yates or Mr. Are we seeing those cartels starting to diversify? And I guess the gist of my question is this has to be a multilateral coalition, an effort of multiple nations working on this. Are you saying?
Well, certainly when enforcement at our border to the south increased, there was a migration of some of these flows to Canada, and we began to see a little bit more of the flow down from Canada in the United States. And when we start enforcing the transport by air, it moves to sea in other ways. It's a constant effort. That part I think we just have to accept as part of the challenge of illicit narcotics and sort of organized crime operating in a modern world. I still think that there is value in pressing very, very hard at the source. And I think that it's definitely the case that this has begun to move to other societies. It was very conspicuous for the first several years of this crisis that it was almost entirely in the United States, overwhelming our healthcare system, overwhelming any kind of treatment, overwhelming law enforcement. But it has started to show up in other countries of Asia, other parts of Europe, and we also need to get at an issue of how it is counted. Someone can go to the emergency room or trauma unit for a lot of different reasons. A little bit like COVID, that there can be multiple factors. And it's only if there was a crime scene that a medical examiner's report is required. And so we're probably undercounting in a lot of different ways. And so how we factor this is important, but also we would probably know more in other countries if they were accounting more effectively too.
And again, the intent of my question is if we're going to...
And you were just watching the House Foreign Affairs Committee having a hearing on the role that China is playing on the fentanyl crisis in the U.S. and a number of witnesses testifying, giving remarks. And I'll just quickly highlight one witness's remarks. This is a witness that we usually have on our show, China expert Steve Yates. He said, China remains the primary global source of fentanyl precursor chemicals and pill pressing equipment, which are then used by Mexican cartels to produce drugs trafficked into the U.S. And he says China has only really taken a limited or a symbolic step to meaningfully stop precursor flows, not to a meaningful degree, calling the response a strategic choice rather than incapability. Okay, let's move on from that. President Trump is projecting optimism about a deal with Iran amid new flare-ups in the region. He's also pushing back on a symbolic move by a few Republicans to limit his war powers. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has the latest on what the president is saying about Iran.
President Trump saying that a ceasefire with Iran is still in place despite recent flare-ups between the two countries in the region. The president also projecting new optimism, saying that a deal with Iran could come as early as this weekend, adding that they're very close now to coming to an agreement. Watch.
The negotiation itself has gone very well, actually. Very well.
Mr. President.
It could happen. I mean, if it happens, and it might not happen, who knows? But if it happens, it could happen like over the weekend.
Mr. President,
how do you define ceasefire? Pretty much the way it is. It's a different part of the world. I'd say in that part of the world, ceasefire is when you're shooting in a more moderate manner.
On AI, Mr. President, yesterday you signed, Mr. President.
That's true. I mean, a ceasefire there is much different than a ceasefire in other parts of the world.
Meanwhile, on Wednesday, in a symbolic move to protest the ongoing war, 4 Republican lawmakers decided with Democrats to pass a resolution that attempted to limit the president's war powers in the war with Iran. Here's one of those Republicans speaking at the Capitol yesterday. Watch.
We have to follow the law.
There's a law in the books. The War Powers Act of '73 says 48-hour notification and 60-day concurrence of Congress. We're past the 60 days. So you have two choices. You either follow the law or you change the law. You can't violate the law. That's not an option.
And President Trump now pushing back, saying in the new Truth Social post that the vote is meaningless, adding that the 4 Republicans who crossed the party line to vote with Democrats are grandstanders, saying that their actions are unpatriotic. President Trump also saying that these Republicans knows exactly where negotiations are standing with Iran and that they should be ashamed of their actions. House Speaker Mike Johnson also criticizing the move, saying that lawmakers should give the president latitude to finish ongoing peace negotiations. The House Speaker also adding that such a symbolic move will do no good to ongoing talks. Watch.
I think it is a very dangerous prospect to take away from the administration and the commander-in-chief right now the ability to negotiate. That's what this does. It weakens us, our position and our leverage in negotiation on the peace in that situation. Operation Epic Fury is concluded.
White House also reiterating the same point, saying that the War Powers Resolution is unconstitutional, adding that even if it's passed in the Senate, which White House officials say is unlikely, it will have no force or effect. Back to you.
And Iris, as well, the president is making an announcement this afternoon about coal and energy dominance. Can you tell us more about this?
Sure. So a White House official telling NTD today that the president is expected to unveil new support for America's coal industry. Specifically, he's rolling out a $700 million new investment to support them, including to build new power, new coal power plants, as well as to boost coal exports. And now, of course, these new plants will be pretty rare in recent history, as they will be the first power plants built since 2013. Meanwhile, President Trump has been vowing to really boost America's energy industry to make sure that America is energy independent. Don.
All right, Iris, thank you. The Hezbollah terrorist group is rejecting a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. The U.S. brokered a temporary peace deal in Washington, but the Iranian proxy says it won't stop attacking the Jewish state. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the latest.
For the first time, all 3 parties are aligned in their determination to keep Iran's terror proxy, Hezbollah, out of the equation.
An Israeli spokesperson on Thursday praising a ceasefire reached between the U.S., Israel and Lebanon. The U.S. State Department announced the agreement on Wednesday after 2 days of U.S.-led talks in Washington.
The ceasefire is contingent on a complete cessation of Hezbollah fire and the evacuation of all Hezbollah operatives from the South Litani sector.
But Hezbollah on Thursday saying it won't withdraw from southern Lebanon and that it won't commit to stop fighting. The terrorist group says northern Israel won't be safe as long as Israeli forces attack Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Israel says it won't negotiate with Hezbollah any longer.
We're no longer going into a pattern of negotiating ceasefires where Israel leaves, Hezbollah comes back, and we go back to the same nonsense. This is stopped. Everybody understands it has to stop.
Under the ceasefire, Hezbollah would have to withdraw from southern Lebanon and Lebanese troops would enter instead to guarantee peace. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio meeting with the Kuwaiti foreign minister at the State Department. The face-to-face comes amid a new U.S.-mediated ceasefire proposal between Israel and Lebanon. Israel's defense minister Israel Katz said the IDF would continue strikes in Lebanon and would not be withdrawing from the country's south. Iranian forces conducted strikes against Gulf countries earlier yesterday. Kuwaiti authorities say one of the strikes hit the country's airport, injuring dozens of people and killing at least 1. Shipping traffic through the strait remains heavily restricted. A fifth of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas normally flow through the waterway. The Congressional Executive Commission on China held a hearing today on the CCP's use of transnational repression inside the United States. Witnesses included a Hong Kong activist with a bounty on her head and the father of Olympic gold medalist Alyssa Liu, who was targeted by a Chinese spy operation on U.S. soil. Let's take a look.
Good afternoon, Co-Chair Mr. Smith and distinguished members of the Commission. Thank you for inviting me to testify here today. My name is Arthur Liu. I came to the United States as a political refugee back in 1989 after the Tiananmen Square massacre. And I'm also the proud father of the Olympic gold medalist Lisa Liu, and also 4 other wonderful children. Today is especially a sad day for me. 37 years ago, on June 4th, 1989, the Chinese government sent tanks and soldiers to kill students and civilians in Tiananmen Square and also in Beijing. At that time, thousands of students and civilians just gathered peacefully to call for the democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the rule of law, and for basic human rights in China. Thousands of them lost their lives, and hundreds more were severely injured. At that time, I was in Guangzhou attending graduate school in Zhongshan University. I was one of the principal organizers of the democracy movement in Guangzhou, China. When news of the massacre reached Guangzhou, I was devastated. I could not understand and believe how a government that claimed to serve the people could turn its weapons against its own young people and civilians. In response, I organized more protests in Guangzhou against the massacre. Of course, soon afterwards, I became one of the most wanted democracy activists in southern China. I was very fortunate to be able to escape from China to Hong Kong. And after I came to America, I continued to organize protests in front of the Chinese consulate in San Francisco and also in front of the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C., calling upon the Chinese government to release political prisoners, religious prisoners in China. I have spoken publicly many times about the human rights abuses in China. Like many refugees, I believed that once I arrived in America, I had left political persecution behind.
Okay, we're going to take a pause on this hearing from the Congressional Executive Commission on China, and this is about the transnational repression in the United States. We're going to pause on that and tune into a event that President Trump is holding right now.
That compared to some of the biggest buildings in the country, actually the biggest, hey, Peter?
Hey, President Trump.
And we haven't finished. The water is pouring in as we speak. And maybe we'll show that what it looks like, because I'm sure the fake news will be thrilled. Take a look. This is from just a little while ago. Nice, clean water. So we're here to talk about clean, beautiful coal. That's clean, beautiful water. That's the longest pool anywhere in the world. And here you can tell they're not progressive, because this is not a progressive, because progressives never wear or show an American flag. These are proud people from Oklahoma. They came from Oklahoma, a company from Oklahoma, to do it. But you notice the American flag, he's proudly showing off his work. You know he's not a liberal and or a progressive. Used to be liberal, but they changed their name somewhere along the way because liberal wasn't working, but progressive doesn't work too. Well, the progressive is a beautiful term. They are not progressive. They're degressive. You got that? What do you think? Huh? Daniel's great. He's a great reporter. And again, we have a picture of a gentleman in a cart. Proudly, this is the head of construction for the job. So you can see it's just finished. This is just minutes before. And there's a gentleman named Secretary Burgum from Interior, Doug, who's been doing an incredible job. So Doug, we have 22 waterfalls. Most of them haven't worked for over 50 years. As of this morning, They all work beautifully, and they're clean. The graffiti's gone. The broken marble is fixed. Well, there's a way of fixing it. You use a thing called silicone and you fix them. And they look beautiful. All of the hate and everything is removed from them. Some of them done through stupidity, actually, but hate. But here's another picture. Now you can tell this is a proud American because he's got a flag. Protesters never have, the bad protesters never have flags up. They somehow don't like the flag too much, but we do. So that's great. We put in today, as you know, about Save America, the Save America Act. I don't know, someday the Senate and the House will get it done, although I must tell you the House has approved it about 3 times already. Save America Act right here. We have, everybody can see that. And then we'll talk about clean, beautiful coal. You're not allowed to say coal within the Trump administration unless it's preceded by the words clean, beautiful. Complicates our life, but it's good, right, Chris, wherever you may be? It is clean and beautiful. I'll tell you, it's effective. So the Save America Act is all voters must show photo ID. So you go to vote and you show photo ID. Not complicated, right? You know, who could oppose it? They say it's an 80-20. It's not. It's about 99-1, and we'll never find the one person. Andy, congratulations, Andy, on a big victory.
Thank you for your help.
That's a great. I appreciate it, but you're very good at what you do, and I've been backing you right from the beginning for a long time, right?
Backing you too, sir.
For years, that's right. You have. Thank you. Congratulations. You won a big election. So you have all voters must show photo ID, identification. All voters must show a little thing called proof of citizenship. Would you say that's 99-1, Mr. Pennsylvania?
I would say that's maybe 100 to 0.
I would think so.
Well, at least it should be.
No, but they say it's 80-20. It's not 80-20. It's 99. And we've never found the one person. There's another one. Then you have no mail-in ballots, but we want to be liberal, as they say. Or we'll say we want to be progressive. So it's no mail-in ballots. You see that's what's happening in California. They're rigging the election. Now, maybe we caught them, and maybe they won't be able to get away with it. They tried with me. They did it successfully the second time. The third time, we made it too big to rig. Too many votes. They couldn't do it. They can only go. They sort of gave up at about 9 or 7 when they got slaughtered with the votes that came in. But no mail-in ballots except for illness, disability, military, or travel. So we're being very progressive. And we just don't want cheating in our elections. And you see it happening in California. Those numbers are coming down rapidly. They found a lot of mail-in ballots last night, shockingly. So we don't want that. Then we added best of. This is best of Trump. No men in women's sports. No transgender mutilization surgery for our children. I would say that's pretty close to 99-1 also. No men in women's sports. I would say that's pretty good. We had the quarterback, Jackson, is the quarterback for the Giants. He's a big, strong guy. And I said, how do you think you do in women's sports, Jackson? He said, pretty good, sir. He didn't know I was joking. He was not worried, so let me put it that way. He would have been the greatest athlete in the history of women's sports. You got to see the size of this guy. Like a male model, and he's going to be a great quarterback. So we talk about that. And so we just would like the Senate, Democrats, Republicans to pass it. Interestingly, Democrat people, not crooked politicians, because most of them are crooked, or they're sick, or they're Trump deranged. There is Trump derangement syndrome. But the people, it's 86, 87%. Democrats. I mean, Democrats are fun. I have a lot of Democrat friends, but I don't know, for some reason, when they go into politics, they get radical left crazy, and they're trying to destroy our country, but we're not going to let that happen. So today we're taking historic action to bring down the price of energy and the cost of living for all Americans with the power of clean, beautiful coal. If you look at China, if you look at so many of the successful countries, they're using coal. if you look at some of the real great failures countries, they're using wind. Just keeps blowing, 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 and puts you right out of business. Very expensive, most expensive energy there is. So wind is not working very well, but they keep it going because people get subsidies by countries that are stupid. Doug, I would say we haven't been long on wind. Do you agree with that? He understands numbers very well. You know, Doug was very, very successful. Believe it or not, I used to think it was in energy, but he was successful in technology, and he sold his company to, I think, Microsoft, right? And for a lot of money, and he ran for politics. He ran for office, went to North Dakota, won immediately, won governor, who was very successful for 8 years. And I watched him during one of the performances of some very talented people. And I said, we're going to get him to work for us. And then I said I was going to put him in charge of energy. And he said, sir, there's a better man than me for that one. Not in all ways you feel that, but in one way. In energy you do. And that was Chris, right? Yeah. Where's Chris?
Right here. Right behind you.
Well, he's a hard one to find. And Chris has done a fantastic job, and he's one of the reasons we're here today. We have had, we're right now double Saudi Arabia and Russia. If you double them up, that's what we produce, more than anybody else times 2. So think of that. As a result of the $700 million investment that I'm announcing today, we will protect 14 coal plants and 42 coal mines. It's a tremendous number. And build 2 new coal plants and 1 massive new export terminal, because we're exporting coal. Coal's a great business, really a big business, and it's real power. It's in terms of power, there's really nothing like it. You have so many different alternatives. They talk about some, but there's no real alternative. China, by the way, last year built 52 coal plants. They built about two windmills. You know, the only time they build a windmill is when they're trying to sell them to stupid people from the United States, the suckers. And by the way, and all over Europe, they sell the windmills, but they don't use them. I wonder why. They use coal plants and other things. These actions will support over 14,000 jobs and save the American people $50 billion in electricity costs. We're pleased to be joined by Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum. He has been great. I don't want to give him a big swollen ego, because then all of a sudden he'll leave me and I'll be stuck with Interior. I don't want to be stuck. But he's really done a great job. Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, who's fantastic. And maybe our MVP. What do you think, Doug? It's close.
Yes, right here.
What do you think? MVP, Lee Zeldin. And the job he's done is great. We had the auto industry in yesterday. They don't want people to fix their car. I said, that's strange. I've never heard of that. They have a thing to, nobody's allowed to fix their car. They gave a man 7 years in jail, actually, because he fixed his own car. So I thought we'd do something about that. But we'll get it all straightened away. Can you believe it? They want a bill that prohibits people from fixing. So if you're mechanically inclined, you know, I went to school with some guys that were, in some cases, horrible students. But they could fix an engine blindfolded. They could take a car apart blindfolded. But they weren't too good at arithmetic and other things. But they were great. And so there's a move on to stop people from fixing their car. I didn't understand it. But we had a great meeting yesterday with the head of General Motors and Roger Penske, head of Ford. We had a great meeting, I think. Thanks as well to a friend of mine also for a long time, West Virginia Governor Patrick Morris. I won by 45 points, Patrick.
It's not enough.
I love those people. And Wyoming, I think maybe even slightly more than West Virginia. Right?
Just a little more.
We did pretty I like this group of people. But Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon, respected guy, great governor, both of them really amazing. And Representatives Dan Muser, Riley Moore, Derek Van Orden, Juan Ciscomani, and Andy Barr. So you have a lot of representatives here that are fantastic. Today we're officially invoking the Defense Production Act to save 13 coal plants in West Virginia, Kentucky, North Carolina, Indiana, Tennessee, Arizona, Arkansas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. These were incredible plants, so productive, really producing a lot of the electricity, right? The electricity, and it's really the best at that. You know, when they find something better, Chris, I think we'll be all set for it, right? But they're a long ways from finding something better.
Coal's critical.
And so when you look at that, those states, West Virginia, Kentucky, North Carolina, Indiana, Tennessee, Arizona, Arkansas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, Wisconsin, what do they all have in common? Trump won them.
Wisconsin, bigger.
I won every one of them by a lot, right?
Yeah.
I'm not even
Pennsylvania,
mentioning
too.
Pennsylvania, which we won also, right?
Yes.
But we won them all. We won all 50. We had an honest count, if you want to know the truth. Our action will allow these facilities to invest in upgrades that will extend their operational lives for decades into the future, reinforce the reliability of our electric grid, which is really the biggest beneficiary, and most importantly, keep electricity prices very low for the American people. This brings the total number of coal plants that we've saved during my administration, just like when we said we saved 25 water fountains. Think of this. These are fountains, beautiful fountains that were so horrible to look at with the graffiti. Over 40 years, many of them closed over 40 to 50 years. The big one, the reflective lake, some people call it a pond, some people it's like a lake. But the reflective lake was built in 1922. It never really worked from the beginning, from 1922. That's a long ways. So it's over 100 years old. And it never really worked because they had the wrong base. It was always leaking. They didn't have what we have today. So it's pretty amazing what's happened. And, you know, I hate to say it won't leak, but it won't leak because we use a material that doesn't allow leaks. You know, it's like a swimming pool doesn't leak. You use the right. This is called swimming pool on steroids. So it's great stuff. And today's actions, we're also supporting coal mines and coal miners in Wyoming and Pennsylvania, Kentucky, West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, North Dakota, and New Mexico. And they're all going back to work. You know, it's interesting with the mines, that famous scene of Hillary when we went to West Virginia. Yeah. And she had just left another state and she was trying to convince everybody that they should go into technology, no longer be miners. And these guys in West Virginia, they didn't want to hear about it. They wanted to remember that scene around the table? And they talked to this beautiful, big, strong miner, and they wanted him to make computer chips. She said, "We'll teach him how to make computer chips." His hands were so large he couldn't hold a computer chip. He's looking at it. He had fingers that were like 3 inches around, and they're talking about making a computer chip. And he didn't like it, and he ended up being one of our best ads ever. And she did rather poorly. I think she lost by 77 points or something like that. Pretty tough to go knock coal, and then you go 2 weeks later to West Virginia to try and win the state. It didn't work out well for her. But the miners love us. What do you think we got with the coal miners? Would you say we got 90%, 100%? What do you think we were on this?
Pretty high.
Pretty
Probably
high.
higher than any group in the country.
Pretty high. Yeah, it can't be bad. Well, we did well with all the groups. I'll tell you, the group that now likes us are the auto workers because we're building more auto plants now than at any time in the history of our country. So it's great to watch and see what's going on with the U.S. We're the most respected country anywhere in the world, and we were a dead country a year and a half. We were a dead country. We were laughed at. We were a mocked, laughed at country. Starting this summer, the West Gateway project will break ground, and by summer 2028, over 12 million tons of clean, beautiful coal per year will be shipped to countries all around the world. And this project's been delayed over 10 years, and Biden ended it, and then Barack Hussein Obama. Have you heard of him? Barack Hussein Obama, another one. He's another beauty. But that delay is now over, and it's going to be very productive. It's going to fuel our electric plants in particular. It's going to be amazing. Finally, we're taking nearly $200 million in that to set aside for the Green New Scam. And it was set aside for the Green New Scam, but the Green New Scam is history. And repurposing that money so that we restart a coal plant in Maryland and help build 2 brand new coal plants in Alaska and West Virginia. And these are all built with new technology. It's very clean. It's amazing how that's come along. It's all very clean. And the first new coal plants to open in our country since 2013. You couldn't open, you couldn't even think. They were only closing them. They were closing them and you had brownouts all over the place. But you don't have that anymore, do you notice? Under 4 years of Sleepy Joe Biden and the radical left Democrats in Congress, not a single permit was approved for a new coal mining project, but in over 1 year of our administration, we've already approved 76 permits for clean, beautiful coal. Last year, we prevented 17 gigawatts of coal-powered electricity from going offline, and that's enough power for about 13 million homes. Think of that, 13 million homes at a very low price. It's the lowest price. So now I'd like to ask Secretary Burgum to say a few words, followed by Secretary Wright, Administrator Lee Zeldin, and then Governor Mark Gordon, and whoever else wants to say a few words, including my new friend, my new governor friend. So, Doug, go ahead.
Well, thank you, President Trump. With these announcements today and everything that your administration has accomplished so far since you've taken office, this administration has done more to save, protect, and expand coal in our country than any administration perhaps ever.
Clean, beautiful coal.
Clean, beautiful coal, absolutely, and none.
I'm only kidding.
That's okay. When you took office, the first thing you did was declare an energy emergency. Some people questioned that, but the prior administration under Biden had gone so far down the path of pursuing the highly subsidized, intermittent, weather-dependent sources of electricity that our grid was at risk. You understood that, and you understood that how key coal is. It's the backbone of having affordable, reliable, and secure American energy to power our country, power our electric grid, power our competitiveness in AI, and power all the manufacturing that's coming back. As you mentioned, with those record coal leases, this is where we take federal public land, lease it to the private sector. They write a check, that comes into the Treasury. They create jobs, help support local communities. So there was 0 coal leases held in 4 years under the Biden administration. You heard the president talk about 76 here. We've slashed red tape. Those took years to get. Some of these projects for coal mining we've approved in less than 1 month under the emergency procedures. And we also have opened up for leasing another 13.1 million acres that people can bid on in our country on public land. And this is land that was set aside. This is not national parks. It's not wilderness area. It's not our wildlife refuges. This is public land that was set aside for the benefit and use of the American people, including energy development, making sure that we've got affordable, reliable energy. So using those public lands is what we're doing. And then the last thing within Interior, I would say we did strategically designate through the U.S. Geologic Survey, which is part of Interior, designate metallurgical coal as a critical mineral. So it's on the list, and that opens up a number of opportunities. But without metallurgical coal, we don't have coke, we don't have a steel industry. The Biden administration was indiscriminate trying to shut down our metallurgical coal as well as our thermal coal. So, and then the last thing you mentioned, the coal export facility, again, working through all the permitting to drive towards that so that we can be selling clean, reliable energy to our allies in the Pacific who want to do more trade with us. And lastly, again, thank you for creating the National Energy Dominance Council. Our Executive Director, Jared Agan, is here today, but Chris, Lee, and I all have details on that team, and that operates right out of the White House, and that's why President Trump is able to get so much done so quickly. This is the first time ever we had a president with a White House council specifically focused on energy and what an impact it's having.
Well, and thank you. Perhaps slightly less importantly, but I think very important, the National Guard of American Heroes is going to be unbelievable. And I'd like to know how you're doing on that, and how are you doing on the Great Triumphal Arch. So every city, just about every major city, has a triumphal arch. This is an arch that's a real bow, a beautiful bow to your military and military victories. Nobody's had more military victories, including recently, than we have. And they never got the arc built. It's been, the Civil War stopped it. That circle has been sitting there for a long time, for many, many years. And, I guess you could go back to, in 1902 they tried it, but in 1860 and 1880 they just never got it done. The Civil War stopped it the first time. That was a good reason. I think that's probably not a bad, that was a good excuse. But after that, it just never happened, and we're going to get it done. And so we're doing it with the Department of Interior, and we're also doing the National Garden of American Heroes, which is phenomenal. And we're doing something that just came up. We'll have a little breaking news here because nobody's heard of it. But at the Lincoln Memorial, the front was supposed to be the back was supposed to be the front. It never got built because they built 2 roadways behind it after it was built, and it shut off the gateway to the water. That was really going to be the main entry, and we're going to be doing that. It's called the Promenade. It'll be the Promenade. They want to call it the Trump Promenade, but I don't know if I want to do that. But it's going to be beautiful. It's a beautiful project, and it's going to take the Lincoln Memorial right down to the Potomac, which it was always scheduled to do. But when they built the roads, that was the end of that. But we have a way of beautifully going over those 2 roads, highways, very, very strong, very important roads, actually, as you know, from the bridge. But it's going to be great. So can I ask Doug for just a couple of seconds to talk about those 3 great projects that we're just starting?
Well, I'd say that it's important for everyone to know that, as you described, these are plans and ideas that have existed almost since the end of the Civil War. But the Macmillan Plan, which is the one that designed the National Mall as we see it today, that was in the early part of the 1900s, envisioned this connection, that you would have the memorial bridge between the Lincoln Memorial and Arlington Cemetery. At the halfway point, there's a very large circle. It was designed to hold a monument. The arc that would go there is a fantastic complement and completion of this plan that's over 120 years ago, President Trump's vision of how to build that. And of course, President Trump has talked to President Macron from France. More people visit the Arc de Triomphe than even visit the Eiffel Tower. I mean, this would be a highlight for Americans to come. The views back at the city from the top of the arch would be amazing. The views from this side, from West Potomac, where the National Garden of Heroes was, looking across at the arch would be amazing. And of course, the promenade on the backside of the Lincoln is, as President Trump described, right now there's no pedestrian access. You're on the mall. People come from around the world. They don't know that 100 yards away is the beautiful Potomac River, which was part of the original plan. And now they'd be able to walk around the Lincoln Memorial, walk on a pedestrian bridge over the first highway, walk over the next one, and right down to the water. It would complete the vision. These projects would complete the original vision, the Macmillan Plan. And how fortunate are we to have the builder-in-chief, someone who both has the vision and the understanding of how to get projects done that would, again, make our city safe and beautiful, just like the executive order President Trump put out last year has accomplished. And wow, we are ready for the celebration of our 250th anniversary. The city's never been safer. It's never been more beautiful, but President Trump's not stopping there. Vision that he has for these projects would extend for generations forward. So thank you, President Trump.
Thank you very much. Great job. And Secretary Chris Wright, please.
But no coal, no modern world. Stated another way, without clean, beautiful coal, a modern world is impossible. And we saw 17 years ago, President Obama's election, an all-out attack on the American coal industry, the industry that built our nation. We wouldn't have the buildings, the factories, the industry, the electricity grid we have today without the critical contribution of coal. It's been the largest source of global electricity for 125 years in a row and will be for decades to come. In the United States, it remains a critical source of our electricity, also a critical source for our industry. Can't produce steel and cement and other materials without coal. And beyond the impacts of coal in our electricity sector, just think of the direct impact on human lives. If President Trump had not been elected and inaugurated in January of 2025, and through his authority at the DOE, we were able to force keeping open 6 coal plants. As of today, there'll be a 7th one, and more than twice as many that voluntarily said, hey, if we're not going to have to close, we need to stay open. 17 coal plants were not closed in 2025 because of President Trump sitting at this desk and in this position right here. That saved 17 gigawatts of electric generating capacity, and the winter storm Fern that hit our country in the last week of January this year, conservatively, hundreds of Americans would have lost their lives if those 17 coal plants had closed. We pushed the East Coast electricity grid in the United States absolutely to the limit. A storm Uri hit 5 years ago in Texas, smaller in geographic extent, not the same magnitude. Over 300 people died. But because we had those coal plants operating and running, and not only did they run, wind power disappeared when the storm hit. Solar's irrelevant in the winter, so the things we talk about didn't even matter to our electricity grid except for cost burdens. Coal stepped up and produced 25% more electricity during this storm than its normal, reliable chugging out of electricity. Without those plants, without that increase in electricity production, we lost a lot of Americans, untold economic damage. President Trump is the president with the courage and the boldness to defend an industry that has been maligned for far too long and to recognize its importance. Americans are upset about high electricity prices. Blame closing existing reliable, secure plants and replacing them with subsidized, unreliable plants, a guaranteed way to drive electricity prices up. But this administration is committed to reversing all of that. That money we've talked about from the Defense Production Act, thankfully, because of the One Big Beautiful Bill and these fantastic congressmen sitting around me and governors, without that legislation, we wouldn't have the money and the Defense Production Act authority to keep open so many plants. It is hard to overstate the magnitude of this. If you look at our efforts across the whole government so far, 45 coal plants are open today that would not be open. Where would we be to reindustrialize America? Where would electricity prices be if we had let all of those plants close? But we're not doing it. All of those plants, that's $700 million of government funding, but it's matched with $1.7 billion of private investment from the owners and operators of those plants. All the people in those states that say, phew, we don't have to kick our industry out and raise electricity prices again. Common sense is returning to Washington, D.C. And for that, I'm incredibly thankful to be here in the United States government, to work for President Trump, who will stand up for what's right, bring common sense back, and reinvigorate an industry without which we would not have the America we have today. And we're going to reindustrialize America, win in the next generation of technologies, and we're going to do it in critical part because of a growing and thriving coal industry. Thank you, President Trump. Thank you, Secretary Burgum. Thank you, Lee Zeldin.
Good. And Lee Zeldin, how about saying a few words?
For so many Americans, clean, beautiful coal is their source of heat, of energy, of warmth, of a job, an economy, a community, a family. And for too long, you saw Democrats who were telling these coal miners that they should just learn the code. And what we saw during the Biden administration at the EPA, for example, was regulation after regulation after regulation, trying to strangulate out of existence coal, to destroy it. Enter President Trump. Declares a national energy emergency, creates a National Energy Dominance Council, and he told us at the EPA at Trump's speed to be getting rid of these regulations as quickly as possible on behalf of those Americans who want to just stay warm, who want to live the American dream, who want to have affordable access to energy. The Democrats were running for power to sit at this desk and to leverage that power to destroy these communities. Enter President Trump. He has saved clean, beautiful coal, and it's been an honor to be part of it.
Thank you, Lee. Great job, too. Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon. Thank you.
Mr. President, it's an honor to be here. Thank you to the secretaries who have breathed life into an economy in Wyoming that has been there for a long time. Wyoming produces the cleanest, most beautiful coal, low sulfur coal.
You don't mind if I push them?
And it's fun because we have a chance to to educate our kids. Now, let me just talk a little bit about the other side of this. When a kid grows up in Wyoming, their education's paid for in large part by the coal severance taxes, by the royalties that come from mining that coal that was shut down by the Democrats. When they have a chance to get a job, they can go look to the coal mine. And it's not just digging coal the way we used to, it's high-tech jobs. You know, at this point, we don't mine coal the way we used to at all. It is very, very technologically proficient. And what's more important, it's environmentally sound. I would invite you to come and look at the reclamation that's happened in the Powder River Basin, and we can demonstrate that it's environmentally sound, that actually wildlife populations thrive and do better. Today, Mr. President, I really want to talk to you a little bit about our recent trip to Japan and to Taiwan, both countries that were going to forswear coal. And now they realize that they need that reliable, dispatchable, secure source of energy. But they can't get it as clean as they can from the Powder River Basin. So to be able to open that Oakland port is absolutely essential for the lifeblood of our state and for our coal mines. It is something that we tried to do in your first administration, and we almost got there. We actually were prepared to go through that, I guess, belt that we have on the West Coast with California, Oregon, and Washington, and finally enforce the Commerce Clause to allow states like New Mexico, Wyoming, Utah, to have access to that Asian market. And let me just tell you one last thing about that. It's not just about clean, beautiful coal. We have companies like Peabody that are now saying, we believe we can get rare earth minerals and critical minerals from what we're doing. So we are advancing technology, advancing the opportunities and the security of the state, all because of your vision, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark, very much. Would you like to say something on behalf of West Virginia?
I would like to say,
that place.
Mr. President, all West Virginians are so deeply grateful to you for your focus on protecting their energy jobs. The coal miners know the incredible importance of why we're here today, and to talk about the potential for new coal-fired power plants, that excites them. And I think West Virginians are really inspired because we're America's energy state. When you think about what's happening on the global scene, where that fight, that international fight with China for information technology supremacy, we believe that your policies are going to allow America to compete and win, and West Virginia is going to supply the coal, the gas, the nuclear to help make that happen. So I'm very excited by everything you're doing, even some of the relatively small things when you come in and you sign agreements with your administration, putting hundreds of people back to work. It's all making a big difference for West Virginia. So thank you, Mr. President.
Like, as an example, the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America. It bothered me for many years. We have 92% of the frontage, and we made that little change. And Mexico was thrilled. They were thrilled about it. But that was a good one, right? You were telling me before that was a good one. It's about the United States now for a little while, if it's okay. Would you have any questions, please?
Yes, President Trump, this was just crossing as we were heading in here. President Zelensky wrote a letter to President Putin. He wants the two of them to meet to hash out the end of the war in Ukraine because he thinks you are too busy with the war in Iran. Is he right?
Well, I don't know. I'm glad that they're maybe talking about meeting. I think we had a lot to do with it. I know exactly what you're doing. But I think it would be great if they met. They should get it done.
Mr. President, there's been a lot of talk lately about the Treasury putting your face on a $250 bill. Have you seen a mock-up of the Trump $250 bill? And if that winds up being currency, would you ever be able to tip anyone anything but that?
Well, I think I'd probably leave it for everybody. I have actually seen something just about 2 days ago. I know it's been pushed by a lot of our supporters, and I'm honored that they're doing it, but we'll see how that all works out. But I have heard about it, and there is a group of people, they really like the job we're doing, so that's a great honor. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, you announced just a few days ago that
you're naming Bill Pulte as the acting director of national intelligence. There's been a little bit of a pushback from some Senate Republicans. Why do you think, Mr. President, he's the best person for the job?
Well, he's very smart. He's a person who's got high integrity. He's done a phenomenal job at Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. You probably have $1 trillion in value there. When he took over, it was much less. And I guess I'm responsible for that, too, because everybody wanted me to sell it in my first term for 10% of what it's worth right now. If I would have sold it, we would have lost $900 billion. We would have lost, think of it, it's probably worth $1 trillion. And I was offered, people want me to sell it at $100 billion, a very small percentage of what it's worth now. So, and he built it up a lot, did a great job. And it's an acting position. It's not a permanent. He's not going to be permanent because, I don't think he'd want to be permanent. But he's a very smart guy, and he may find out some things about the rigged elections, et cetera, et cetera. I think he'd like to do it. I think he wants to do it very much. Got a lot of energy. But he'll be very good. Again, it's not a permanent position. Right. We're interviewing people right now, but it's somebody just to take it over for a little while.
Does he have the necessary, in your view, Mr. President, the necessary national security experience to take on that position?
Well, I do, and I think he does, actually, because he's smart. Because a lot of national security, I wasn't greatly experienced in national security, and I think I've done a really great job with it. A lot of people would say that. I've ended 8 wars, and soon to be a 9th. I hope that works out, too, Frankly, probably, and there's another one also. It could be 10. No president, I don't think a president's ended 1 war having to do with outside of this country. So, we've done a good job. I would say that Bill is a guy that will be able to figure it out very quickly. Again, it's short term, but he may be very effective for a short period of time.
Mr. President, will there be a proportional share increase of electricity production as a percentage of our nation's electricity output? And my follow-up is, I took that historic trip with Secretary Wright of the small modular nuclear reactor on the West Coast early this year. Are we making more progress? Because I know how critical gas and coal is for the secure grid.
Well, the answer is we are, but Chris, you want to answer that?
Yes, our electricity grid essentially runs on gas, coal, and nuclear. Those are the 3 key sources. They're the backbone of the American electricity grid. We're in favor of seeing all 3 of them grow. You will see all 3 of them grow during this administration. And in fact, later today, before the sun goes down, you'll see a big announcement in the nuclear space related to the trip you came on.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. President, President Putin said today that he was willing to make compromises that you requested to end the war with Ukraine if Ukraine was willing to make similar compromises.
Yeah.
What were the compromises that you asked?
Well, I'd rather not say, because Peter asked me. I think it was meant as a little wise guy question, but I'm not sure. But I'm very responsible when that happens. It's going to happen. They're going to both make compromises. I suggested those compromises. And, we've had a lot to do with it. We'd love to see they're 2 very good people. They're 2 very, incredible countries, beautiful countries. They've got to stop. Last month, they had 25,000 people killed. Soldiers, mostly soldiers. Some people, but mostly soldiers. And it's been averaging probably almost 25,000 people every month of soldiers killed. And I've been very strong on the fact that they've got to get that over with. So, but they do. I want them each to make certain compromises. I think they're going to do that. Yeah, Daniel?
Mr. President, thank you. You, through your actions, have saved and supported more than 100 coal plants in your second term. When you hear something like that and you try to create an environment where they're not just surviving, they're thriving, what does that do to the reliability of our energy grid, but to the economies as well of states like Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Wyoming? How does it bolster those economies?
Well, we were destroying our grid because we were relying on wind and other things that don't have the power, they don't have the strength, they're very expensive. Wind is the most expensive form of energy. It sounds good. Wind, beautiful wind, but it's very intermittent. But those windmills cost a fortune. They break, they kill the birds, they're bad for the environment. Nobody wants to be near them. The houses, I don't know how they got popular. They're not popular with the people. They're popular with investors because they get subsidy. But we pretty much cut that subsidy out, I think, Doug, right?
Absolutely. In the working families tax cut bill, it all expires, and since the Since the subsidies have gone away, there's virtually no one, particularly offshore, no one is trying to build one of those projects in America. Turns out they weren't trying to generate electricity, they were just trying to generate tax credits.
You're supposed to be making money with, with energy. And here, wind, it needs subsidy. Energy shouldn't need subsidy. We have so many different forms of energy, but I've talked about it for years. Wind is the most expensive. It's the worst. It causes tremendous problems, and it does. It kills millions and millions of birds a year. Nobody mentions that. You'd think if that were anything else, everybody would be sued. If you kill a bald eagle, they put you in jail for like 4 years or something, and yet windmills knock them out of the air all the time. Nothing happens. It's disgraceful. So we're into energy that really works and works powerfully. Yes, go ahead.
And we're waiting outside to come into the Oval Office. Everyone's looking at the UFC structure, the claw. Are you happy with how that's coming along, and what are your expectations?
We put it up in 5 days. It's incredible. And I told yesterday the story of the Eiffel Tower, and it was 1889. It was put up. It was going to be brought down right after the World's Fair ended, which was up for a short while. And they said, well, let's leave it a little bit longer. Then they said, let's leave it a little longer. It never came down. That was 1889, the World's Fair in Paris. So I jokingly said, let me tell you a story about the Eiffel Tower. Now, it'll come down after the fight. There were actually some people who said, he wants to leave it up. Yes, please.
Mr. President, about the Columbus statue, Columbus Fountain at Union Station, it looks amazing.
Thank you.
And what does that mean for the relations between Italy and the United States?
It means Italian people love Trump. And because, that was controversial. People want to rip it down. You see how beautiful it is. And we didn't only not rip it down, but Doug and his group and all of us together, we beautified it. It's I didn't know that marble was going to be so beautiful once we cleaned it up. You wouldn't believe it when you saw that thing was loaded for 50 years with filth and graffiti and everything else. It's amazing. It's amazing how good they did. A really great job.
On the Strait of Hormuz, Mr. President, do you still want European allies' help? We're discussing energy today. And
well, we don't need the help.
What kind of help would you want?
We're the most powerful military in the world. We gave them a chance to help, but they chose not to. NATO. We went to the NATO countries. We went to others too, in all fairness to NATO. And I wouldn't say I gave them a hard sell, but I said, hey, if you'd like to help, it would be wonderful. And they all turned us down. And, it's going to be an expensive proposition for them because they shouldn't have done that. They should have helped. We don't need it. We have our own. We have much more than we need in terms of oil and energy generally. But European countries and other countries, they need it tremendous. Some of the European countries need it really big. And they should have said, we'd love to help. But
if you could choose, Mr. President, if you could choose, what would you ask them to do, sir? If you wanted
I would have asked them. I mean, there's not much. Look. We won. There's no Navy. There's no Air Force. We've wiped them out. We've wiped out their leadership and almost all of it. We've wiped out all their military leaders. They're down on the third. Now maybe they're very good. I don't know. I can't tell you that. But certainly the first ones didn't do very good because they weren't. They were literally after 3 days, almost the entire military was wiped out. They had to get new generals, and then after that, they had to get more new generals. And we knocked out their anti-aircraft. Their Air Force, just about everything you can knock out. So, and then you read in the fake news that they're doing really well in the war. I mean, it's unbelievable. We knocked out everything there is to knock out, and you'd pick up the fake news and they'd say how well they've done. They're doing brilliantly. They have no Air Force. They had we knew that, 159 ships. Andy, out of 159 ships, all 159 lie beautifully at the bottom of the ocean. We actually took pictures of them down there. And then you read the fake news, they say, well, their Navy is really great. You know what they have now? Little runabouts with a machine gun on the front. The ships don't even really deal with them. They're like a gnat, they get off. That's all they have. It's crazy. This country needs a fair press. And one thing I think that's done is expose how corrupt our media is. And I really do, while we're here, I hope the media looks at this election that's taking place in California, where they think it'll take 7 or 8 days to count the votes. Can you believe this? I mean, they spend all that money on the machines, the big voting machines. They think it's going to be 7 or 8 days before we know who won the election. But the numbers are looking strange because without any vote counting, the numbers dropped very precipitously for 2 Republicans that are doing well, that had been doing well. And I hope you're all watching it because I'm watching it very closely.
Mr. President, are you worried that China is funding an anti-data center movement here?
No, I'm not worried about it. We had a great meeting with China. And, you know, they do things to us and we do things to them. I say it all the time. They say, oh, are you worried about China tapping your phones? I said, well, you know, they're worried about the same thing. No, we're very highly sophisticated. We've become very highly sophisticated. We had 4 years. I rebuilt the military. We had a military that was not good, and we rebuilt it. And I didn't know I'd use it quite as much, but we used it. Ukraine has been given a tremendous amount of our without our military and our equipment, Ukraine wouldn't be alive to fight today. You know, I mean, just in terms of the question. We gave them hundreds of billions of dollars worth of equipment and the best equipment. We make the best equipment anywhere in the world, but they wouldn't have lasted 1 or 2 days. They wouldn't have been able to do it. Remember the anti-tank missiles, remember that, right? When the tanks got stuck in the mud? And then they went around and boom, 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 boom. And those were given by yours truly. They said Obama gave sheets and Trump gave the anti-tank as one of the most devastating weapons. But you check that out. But we have the greatest military. We have the greatest military equipment anybody's ever seen before. Look at Venezuela. We went in there. It was over after about 48 minutes. And, you know, they have a strong military, different kind of a military, but a lot of soldiers. And you look at Iran, where we essentially wiped out their military. Now, there's some missiles left, but very few compared to what they had.
And speaking of our military and Iran, I wanted to ask you about this report that you would only restart the conflict with Iran if they killed U.S. troops. Is that your red line for ending the ceasefire?
If they killed?
U.S. troops.
What does that mean?
That you would restart the war with Iran if they killed U.S. troops.
Well, it would be a good reason. I'll be honest with you. If they kill U.S. troops, I think I would do that very quickly. Yeah, that's a very interesting question.
Ron, you responded to the vote in the House yesterday on the War Powers Resolution. Also, we've seen Hezbollah reject the U.S. brokered peace in Lebanon. You said that negotiations are in final stages, but Iran's saying they're stalled.
They didn't reject me. They didn't reject that. And they're looking. I think Hezbollah, I will tell you, they called us and they said, how about stopping? And I think you're going to see things happen over there. That's been like a little bit of a different world, but it's interconnected with Iran. And it would be really nice if Lebanon could have some peace. Lebanon's been under attack for so many years and always like an underdog. And it would be really nice if it could end. And I spoke to Bibi Netanyahu about that. And I speak to them about it. And I actually spoke to Hezbollah about it. And I think progress is made. That's been going on for a long time. You know, when you look at that for years and years, 48 years, I say, well, let's get this settled. How long has it been going on? 48 years. I said, that's a long time. Not that easy, but go ahead.
As we get closer to the midterms, are you starting to factor in domestic reaction to this in your handling of this? Or are you
I just do what's right.
Indefinitely?
No, I mean, look, it was like Venezuela. It was very unpopular. Then we won. And my numbers went through the roof. I have very high poll numbers. They went through the roof. It was very unpopular when I went to Venezuela. They said, oh, we don't want... Well, first of all, that one's relatively close. It's sort of a semi-neighbor, right? And the relationship with Venezuela is incredible. We've taken out millions and millions of barrels of oil out of Venezuela. It's very oil-prone. I guess, Chris, one of the most, right?
Yes.
and we've taken out, you're sort of leading it, but do you want to just tell them real fast about the relationship we have with Venezuela, Chris?
Yeah, things with Venezuela have gone very well. Venezuelan oil exports today are 3 times higher than they were right before we went in. So it has been a meaningful incremental supply of oil to the world, and one of the reasons we're solving a 47-year-old problem of Iran's race for nuclear weapons. And oil prices in the U.S., we wish they were lower, but gasoline prices in the U.S. are, a little over $4. They're $10 in Europe. They're higher in Asia. They're very high in California. The bigger threat to energy prices in the United States is Democratic green energy policies. They have driven up energy prices far more than a conflict in Iran. And the conflict in Iran will come to an end. We hope that crazy green energy, drive up energy prices policy of the Democrats at federal and state levels, we hope that comes to an end too.
And remember this, if you want to call it a war or if you want to call it a military operation, you cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. And everybody agrees to that, almost everybody. But wait a minute, our gasoline prices are lower than they were with Biden without that. And he would have let them have, in fact, he inspired them to have, frankly, a nuclear weapon, him and Obama. Obama picked the wrong country, you know that. And the Obama deal, I terminated that, or they would have had a nuclear weapon. That was a road to a nuclear weapon. Our deal, if we make that deal, and it's going well, but who knows, if we make that deal, it's the exact opposite. They will never have a nuclear weapon.
It sounds like you're in it for as long as it takes.
I'm not going to let them have a nuclear weapon, no. With Obama, it was a road, you know that, it was a road to a nuclear weapon. That was a short-term agreement, and at the end of which they would have a nuclear weapon. So they would have had it 4 years ago. Then we attacked with this beautiful plane right here, the B-2 bomber. We attacked 10 months ago, we attacked their nuclear sites, and they were obliterated. It turned out that, CNN was wrong. They said, well, maybe they weren't hit that hard. They were hit so hard, nobody knows if you can even get it out. But the only ones that have the capability of getting out is us and China. We're the only ones with that kind of equipment that's powerful enough to go down that deep into a mountain. But that mountain crushed it. That mountain literally collapsed on top of it. Those pilots did one hell of a job. And now the atomic energy, as you know, has backed us up on that. They think it's a very, very hard thing to get it. But we'll get it anyway. But we're the only one, and China. I believe China too. But we're the only two that have the capability.
President Biden is out promoting a new book this week. When you met with Joe Biden, President Joe Biden, right here in the Oval Office on November the 13th of 2024, could you detect any cognitive decline in President Biden at that time?
No, not really. I mean, he was the same guy I've been watching for a long time. I mean, you could go back 40 years. I watched him 40 years ago, 30 years ago. He was never the sharpest guy. You do know that, right? It wasn't like he was sharp as a tack. But, no, it was the same guy. They actually invited me here before the election, which was strange. We went here before, but then I met also, as you know, we did the ritual. And, I mean, he was fine as far as I was concerned. I don't know, something happened to him during the debate. It could have been me. I thought I had a very good debate. Nobody ever says that. They say that Biden did badly. What about me? Did I do well? There's a reason he did badly. So the question is, did he do badly because he choked or because he didn't have it? But he didn't have a good, I would say this, he did not have a good night.
But during that time period, you met with him for about 2 hours. You didn't feel he was
No, he spoke softly, very softly. And as we started to speak, I mentioned this to people. We spoke very, very softly, very low. And as we talked, we got along really well. And I thought he was fine. When I say fine, I mean, was he like talking to Doug Burgum? Was he like talking to Chris? Was he like talking to any of these monsters up here, all these tremendous politicians and environmental geniuses? Was he like talking to Andy Barr? No. He was fine.
I have a question about Hunter Biden. He's on social media now, and he has suggested, maybe joking, I don't know, that he could run for president in 2028. how would he do, Hunter Biden, in a 2028 Democratic primary?
Well, you would think that, past has something to do with winning an election, and I would say his past is not the greatest. Where's Hunter? Remember my Where's Hunter? It became the #1 shirt anywhere in the world for about 3 weeks. I'm not going to say bad. I'm sure, hey, if the guy from Maine can do well, I guess Hunter could do well too, because the guy from Maine is a basket case. And I would say worse than him is the one from Texas. That looks like Alfred E. Newman. I would say that if he can do well, maybe Hunter can do well. I'm not sure. It'll be pretty close as far as I'm concerned.
And I've got a question about the nuclear dust. So the bombers go in, they entomb a lot of this enriched uranium.
Yeah.
At this point, do you need a deal with Iran to go get it? Or have you thought about just a covert, daring, send in the SEALs, send in the Rangers?
But I didn't want to be Jimmy Carter, I didn't feel like being Jimmy Carter.
So that's off the
We
table.
did. Well, we thought about it right at the very beginning, before we did what we did, before we destroyed their entire military. We thought about it, and I didn't want to be in a position where you had, to get there. It's not like Venezuela. Like you go in, you're there for a matter of minutes, and you're out, and everybody's waving goodbye as you take off, and you brought the cargo back. This is different. You'd have to be there for 2 weeks. You'd need massive equipment. You'd have to airlift the equipment in. You're in a war zone. And there was a time at the very beginning when we thought about doing that, because they would have not been watching, but they would have found out. I mean, during a period of a week to 2 weeks, you would have had a major construction operation, because that plane, and more importantly, those people that operate those planes, including the mechanics, that flew for 37 hours round trip. Think of that. And the tankers that refilled them 4 times, and what an operation it was. Amazing. And but we would have been, Peter, we would have been there for a period of from a week to 2 weeks. We would have gotten it. But I said, I don't like the idea of that. All of a sudden, they, pinpoint, they still had missiles left. That means they would pinpoint you and just keep lobbing them in until one gets through, and people would have gotten killed. So I didn't like it. We could get it right now. I don't think they could stop us if we wanted, but there's no reason to. It's entombed. You use a good word. It's entombed. We also have cameras on it through Space Force. We have very powerful cameras. Every door, there's a door, you know where the doors go? They go to bad places. But every single place on those mountains is basically three, because we also hit it with tomahawks after. After that we hit it with tomahawk. Every inch of that land has cameras on it. We have about 9 of them, and they're on it. We cover it. So if anybody even got near it, we would know what we had to do.
And we've heard you want to meet with the new Ayatollah, the new supreme leader.
I don't want to meet, but if I did meet, I'd be honored to meet him. I'd like to see if we make a deal. But if we make a deal, it's possible that I would meet him. I'd be okay with
Would
it.
that happen here in the U.S., White House?
Oh, I don't know,
NTD?
Peter. I haven't really heard too much about it. I didn't suggest it, but some people have suggested it. If it happened, it would happen. I'd be respectful.
Do you think because Epic Fury killed his dad and his wife and his kid that he's got hard feelings and wouldn't want to meet?
Well, I would say I'm not his favorite person. But with that being said, he's probably I don't know him. He's probably a professional. In some circles, he has a very good reputation, actually. Sometimes some people say bad, but a lot of people say bad about me. It's totally false, of course.
Mr.
President. On jobs, tomorrow the jobs report will be released. While the unemployment rate has been steady at 4.3%, the black unemployment rate has been 7.3%. When you ran for president, you courted black voters and talked about what you described as black jobs. How do you describe why this disparity is happening? What can you do to close that?
Well, we're doing very well with the black jobs, African American jobs. I saw some numbers that we're doing really well. But where we're really going to do well is when all these plants are open. We're building many car plants. We're bringing cars back from Germany. We're bringing, we lost the car industry years ago. 54% of the industry went to Germany, Japan, Canada, Mexico. It's all coming back. It's amazing. And where you're Black worker is really going to do well is when those factories open. So I think they're going to be great. We've been doing very well. It's been a big focus for me. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. On today's announcement, how do you ensure the estimated cost savings are passed on to the consumers and not held by the company? And then on Iran, what specific progress has been made today in talks with them, and where are the sticking points still?
So we're really lowering costs. You know, when I came into this job, we had the highest inflation in the history of our country. 48 years, they say, but I think the history of our country, whether it's 48 years or more. But we had tremendous inflation with Biden, during the Biden. They had one of the highest ever. And I inherited that. The costs were very, very high. And at my first news conference, Peter and others were screaming at me about eggs. Remember, Peter? Eggs. What about eggs? Maybe it wasn't you, but I wanted to inject Peter into it. But he was screaming to me about eggs. And I said, what? Tell me about eggs. This is 2 days in. They said eggs had quadrupled. I said, well, they didn't quadruple under me. And they didn't want me to order eggs for the Easter egg hunt that was going to take place in a few months, right? And I said, nope, we're not going to. They wanted me to order plastic eggs. And I said, nope. And we got eggs down to lower than what it was long prior to when I took over. And eggs today are about 15% lower. What we had is a bunch of con artists, the Democrats. And what they did is they said, they left. They gave the highest prices that we've ever had for all products, groceries, everything. And they started saying affordability. They'd say, this is about affordability. It's a con job. I inherited their high prices. We brought those prices way down. And when and if you go back 3 months ago, if you go back before the war started, think of it, 3 months. So with Vietnam, we were there for 19 years. With Iraq, it was about 9 years. With another one, it was about 12 years. And with another one, we had all these wars that lasted for 9, 10, 12, 19 years for Vietnam. Think of it. And they said, you're in there for 3 months. This is a terrible thing. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers have been killed in these other wars. We lost not one soldier in Venezuela. We didn't lose one soldier. And we lost a total of 13, which is 13 too many. But when you look at hundreds of thousands of soldiers were killed in these various wars, they lasted many, many years. We're in there for a few months, and what we've done is amazing. They won't have a nuclear weapon. And we did. It was tough because we just got, Doug and everybody came in to see me, we just got the best numbers. Well, today, again, the New York Stock Exchange and every other exchange just hit a new all-time high. That's 73 days out of my short term. We've hit brand new highs. Every 401k is setting records. A 401k, a lot of people have. You probably all have 401ks. Look at your 401k. You're happy about your 401k? You know, the nice reporters are smiling at me, and the stupid reporters are like that. But their 401ks are setting records. They should be happy. They shouldn't be angry. They should be very happy. But 401ks are setting records. They've never had anything like it. So, you know, we've done a good job. As far as Iran's concerned, you're going to find out what the deal is. But the main parts of the deal is they can't have a nuclear weapon. The Strait will open immediately. You know, it's going to open immediately. And we've largely swept for mines. We have the most sophisticated mines. They're underwater minesweepers. I actually said to somebody, one of the generals, why underwater? He said, because usually it's hostile. You know, when you're looking for mines, typically it's not in a good neighborhood, right? So underwater made a lot of sense when it didn't take long to figure that one out. So I think we're doing very well, but we're going to see if we're going to win one way or the other. We're going to win on paper, or we're going to win military. One way or the other. It's going to be militarily or on paper.
Mr. President, Mr. President, how critical is energy dominance, whether it be coal, whether it be LNG, whether it be oil, to national security?
Without it, you can't win. As an example, AI is a big deal. Whether we like it, not like it, it's going to be amazing in many ways. It's going to be, I think, for medical, it will be amazing. But without massive amounts of energy, you can't even play the game. And we're leading China by a lot in AI. I was talking to President Xi about it. But if we didn't do, Lee Zeldin's done so great because, number one, fast approvals from professionals. You know, you'd have the best firms in the world submitting papers to them. And We didn't keep them waiting for 10 years and then vote against them after 10 years. That was, guys would file with the environmental for a plant of some kind. After 15 years, they would be rejected. It was terrible. Now we have great professionals there, and we only accept plans from great professionals, but we give them fast turnaround. And it's been really amazing. I think the biggest thing we've done, Lee, is we let these geniuses with all this money build their own electric plant. We don't take it from our grid. We let them build their own plant. They become a utility. So they're building a plant, and at the same time, they're building electricity. Because if we didn't do that, you couldn't have anything. You couldn't have, and we're letting that happen too with car plants and other plants. If they want to build their own electric, but with the AI, you hear so much about it. But one of the biggest things, they build their own, and then excess energy that they create will go back into the grid. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, on Cuba, Mr. President.
Just let him have one.
Mr. President, Secretary Rubio was in Delhi last week. He delivered a letter from you to Prime Minister Modi. And sir, you also addressed people of India to your favorite ambassador, Sergio Gore.
That's right.
Yeah. Both of them have said the trade deal is around the corner. Where do you stand on the trade deal?
Well, we have it. And, look, India for years has, and I don't blame them, I blame us because we had stupid people here. India for years really took advantage of the United States. You know that. Are you from India by any chance? Huh? I thought you were from Germany.
I'm from India.
I'm only kidding. You're central casting, okay? And that's a very good thing. India for years took advantage of this country. They charged us tremendous tariffs, and they paid nothing. They wouldn't let Harley, as an example in the past, they wouldn't let Harley Davidson sell its motor. They would charge 200% tariff. So Harley Davidson was precluded. They ended up going to India and building their own plants, which is unfortunate that happened, but it happens. It was before me. But they charged tremendous amounts of tariffs to our company, and we didn't charge them anything. They sold motorbikes here too. You know what we charged them? Nothing. And now it's the exact reverse. And we're making a lot of money with India. But we'll get to a deal, because I like your Prime Minister a lot. He's a good friend of mine. Get along great, and we're going to make a deal. We have a very good relationship.
Mr. President, speaking of deals, Mr. President, on Cuba, are your sanctions on Cuba meant to accelerate its collapse?
No, we just want them to be a nicely run country that can feed its people. Look, it's a failed nation. Without Venezuela, Venezuela, because it has such wealth in the ground, mostly in the ground. But Venezuela took care of them for years, and they took care of Venezuela. They were like the bodyguards. When we went in and burst into their country, the Venezuelans were guarding Maduro and everybody else. It was mostly, the soldiers were, in that case, we had a lot of Cubans were guarding. The Cubans were the guards, and they're good soldiers. But the country is starving, and it's got no energy, it's got no oil, it's got no money, it's got nothing. It's got a beautiful piece of land. You could have beautiful resorts. Doesn't have oil, but Venezuela was giving them the money to survive, and now, the money is, I guess you could say, is coming to us and is going to Venezuela. Venezuela has been an amazing thing because we've paid for the cost of the attack many, many times over. And it's been a long time since you've heard of it.
Do you think that Cuba is close to collapsing, though, based on everything you just laid out? Do you think that Cuba is close to collapsing?
It sort of collapsed. And we're going to handle that as soon as we've finished. I like to do one thing at a time. And we'll take care of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And as soon as that's done on our way back, we'll just make a little brief stopover.
Mr. President.
We'll take care of it. We want to help them out. Look, we have a lot of people that voted for Trump. Whether they did or not, it didn't matter. But I had 95% of the Cubans voted for me. They're unbelievable people. They're energetic. They're entrepreneurial. Some of the richest people in Miami are Cuban. They're unbelievable. And I'm going to take good care of them. I'm going to let them go back to their land. They want to be back with family. They have a lot of family over there. They've been treated very badly by Cuba. But we're going to treat Cuba well, and we're going to let our people go back and let them invest in Cuba if they'd like. So we have some very good plans for Cuba. I think, we have to get rid of the regime was very tough, very nasty. The difference is now they don't have money coming in. They had a lot of money coming in from Venezuela. They don't have any money coming. They had oil coming in. They had money coming in. But we're going to take care of Cuba.
Mr. President, sir. Mr. President.
And they, you know what? They want us to. The people want us there so badly.
Mr. President, sir. Last night, huge night for the city of New York. The Knicks won Game 1 of the NBA Finals. There's been a lot of speculation. Have you decided whether or not you want to attend a game at Madison Square
Well,
Garden?
I've been a Knicks fan for a long time, and I'm also a Jim Dolan fan. He's a nice guy, okay? He's been a long time wanting to win, and he's a competitive guy, and he's got a team that's amazing. You know, I don't think they've lost a playoff game.
12 straight wins.
Can you imagine that? And it was not looking good. I saw the beginning of the game, and it wasn't looking good. I missed the middle because I talked to generals all night long now. But I watched that end of the game, and they were dominant. Really amazing. And Wemby's a great player. He's going to be a great player, and he is already a great player. I say, how do you guard this guy? 7'5", and he's got a great shot, right? But they find a way to do it. They're really great. They're a great team. And I'm happy for Jim, because Jim has really been fighting hard to, produce such a team. So you never know. The answer is yes. He's invited me. I'm going.
Which
I'll
game
be.
have you decided, sir?
Say it.
Game 3, Game 4? Are you excited?
It could be Monday. Yeah, Monday.
Mr. President, speaking in New York.
Maybe I'll do both.
You mentioned your meeting with the automakers yesterday. Can you tell us a little bit about that, more about that in particular? Did you discuss trade, tariffs, USMCA?
We had a great meeting with the auto. I mean, most of them were here. They were really talking about the fix your own car kind of a thing, right? But they're doing very well since I'm in office, because I got rid of a lot of environmental restrictions. And in fact, you might just tell them a little bit about that, Lee. We made it so much easier for them to build a car. They could build a less expensive car that's much better. And they were so choked up with environmental nonsense that in order to save 4 ounces of gasoline, you had to spend thousands and thousands of dollars. Lee, do you want to go into that point?
President Trump, we sent to Congress 3 Biden EPA waivers to California that Congress passed. President Trump signed last year, getting rid of the electric vehicle mandate that a whole bunch of other states had signed on to. Just a couple of months ago, President Trump announced here at the White House the largest act of deregulation in the history of the United States, the repeal of the 2009 endangerment finding. All the greenhouse gas emission standards in light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles were following the law. And what that means for cost of living, just on that act alone, $2,400 more affordable per vehicle for Americans. The victories come out every single day. President Trump gave us very clear guidance. He wanted us to act at Trump speed to get this done as fast as possible. And what you see now all across America is billions upon billions of investments all across this country with new factories being built. They believe in America. They're investing in America with the American jobs to come up with it. And by the way, consumer choice, we got rid of that climate participation trophy for that annoying start-stop feature in cars to make your car die at every stop sign and red light. So yeah, the gifts, the receipts, the wins, they keep coming, and we're just getting started.
Did they ask you for any tariff changes on auto?
No, they didn't do that. Look, they're making so much money now because I did something else that I don't know. Does it because we have no tax on tips and no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, right? So that's really been big. That's turned out to be much bigger than anyone knew. If you look at the people, they're saving from $5,000 to $7,000, $8,000 even on average because of that. So it's been good. But I did something else that nobody talks about. If you buy a car and you borrow money, you're allowed to deduct the interest for income tax purposes. Never happened before. And deductions were always meant for rich people. They weren't meant for middle-class people or other people wanting to buy a car. So now you're allowed to get a deduction of your interest payment. That's a tremendous thing. I mean, but what's the key? Only if the car is made in America. Thank you very much, everybody.
And that was President Trump at the White House praising his administration's energy agenda. And he highlighted major progress on restoring and expanding clean, beautiful coal, as President Trump calls it. So he's saying that his administration had opened and reopened, repaired as well, coal plants. So he gave some announcement as to what he might do, support coal production and extend the life of coal plants and mines, build new coal plants and export terminal as well. So he repeatedly criticized China as well, he mentioned China, but he criticized wind energy and green policies, arguing they are expensive and unreliable. Mentioning China, he referenced that China heavily builds coal plants, and also taking reporter questions, a lot of them on the Iran war. President Trump said he is not worried about the war and the outcome because he says the United States will win no matter what, either through a deal, a paper win, or militarily. Okay, let's move on now. The Justice Department announcing fraud charges against over a dozen suspected suspects in Ohio and a new FBI most wanted list for fraudsters. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
The days of the brazen theft that we've seen of taxpayer dollars, abusing the generosity of the American taxpayer is over.
As the Trump administration continues its crackdown on fraud, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche says 14 individuals have been charged in Ohio over their alleged involvement in fraud schemes amounting to over $50 million. The Justice Department has also indicted 2 Ohio state employees.
A 32-count indictment against 2 state employees and 2 other co-conspirators for allegedly billing $30 million to the government for therapeutic behavioral services that were never provided.
In addition, Blanche says 4 suspects have been indicted in a scheme to defraud a COVID program.
These programs, as we all know, were meant to benefit small businesses and individuals struggling because of the pandemic.
After Blanche's announcement, FBI Director Kash Patel unveiling a new FBI Most Wanted list.
It is live officially on the FBI website. I want all Americans to take a look at these most wanted individuals and look at the amounts, the tens of millions and billions of dollars in fraud that they have decimated our societies from. We rely on you. Our best form of information is the American public.
Patel urges Americans to contact the Bureau with any info, saying there's no such thing as a bad piece of information. And, quote, the only bad piece of information is the one you don't give us. The new list can be found at FBI.gov. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
The United States has announced that it will be cutting its contributions to NATO, the Pentagon citing the potential of fighting multiple conflicts at the same time. U.S. European Command notified allies yesterday that Washington would right-size its contributions to the NATO force model. U.S. officials first informed their fellow member states of the decision during a meeting of defense policy officials at NATO headquarters in Brussels last month. U.S. Air Force General Alexis Grinkowicz said in a statement that there had been a, quote, unhealthy codependence on American forces. Grinkowicz, also Supreme Allied Commander Europe, added that President Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth have, quote, been clear that this needs to change and it will change. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane was in Caracas yesterday for talks with senior interim government leaders. The general's office saying discussions focused on regional security and internal stability. The trip marked Kane's first official visit to Venezuela. Talks also focused on the U.S. military's role in implementing a 3-phase plan introduced by President Trump after U.S. forces captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in January. Kane also met with U.S. Embassy leadership and staff and visited the embassy's Marine Security Augmentation Unit. In a statement, the Office of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, quote, the United States is committed to a stable, prosperous, and democratic Venezuela aligned with the United States. The Department of Homeland Security posting today on X, quote, the Delaney Hall riot is not random. It's part of a highly coordinated campaign of violence against our officers. That's after Fox News Digital published an investigative report that says dozens of nonprofits are coordinating anti-ICE protests through encrypted signal chats. NTD's Sean Marshall has more.
Speculation about how Delaney Hall ICE protesters were being funded started to rise after journalist Nick Sorter posted findings on fresh supplies a block away from the protest grounds. Multiple journalists also filmed a tent of protest supplies with food and medical aid. Not long after that, a team of concerned citizen researchers on XApp infiltrated a signal chat group detailing directions for mutual aid monetary support funding. Also, in a separate Delaney Hall signal chat investigation, the New York Young Republican Club uncovered a list of journalists targeted with descriptions about them. Fox News Digital then reported on the nonprofit organization's big money trails and how about 100 groups are strategically coordinating protests, with $825 million in combined annual revenue. The Department of Homeland Security posted this statement to their X app, social media. Our message is clear. We will find, arrest, and prosecute to the fullest extent of the law any of these rioters who threaten or assault our law enforcement. One Delaney Hall Signal Chat group posted a warning to group commenters that they should not post anything that they don't want read back to them in court. Fox's investigative story says about 70 of the groups have received special designations as charities by the IRS and have a status as regular 501c3 and 501c4 nonprofits. Also, labor union 501c5 and 501c6 nonprofits that gain from tax-deductible donations and certain tax-free benefits. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Brace yourself for travel disruptions this summer. American Airlines is temporarily suspending some of its routes due to steep jet fuel costs. In a statement, American Airlines says it adjusted service for select routes in August and September, and that impacted travelers would be offered alternative arrangements or refunds. CBS reports that the affected routes include LA to Washington Dulles, Cleveland, Ohio, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The airline says it's not cutting any of its routes indefinitely. Airlines around the world have canceled flights and suspended routes due to steep jet fuel costs. Many are also hiking fees or cutting other perks in efforts to save money. Jet fuel costs can amount to about 30% of an airline's total expenses. They have soared some 40% since the start of the Iran war. The Strait of Hormuz, a key waterway for the world's flow of oil, remains effectively closed to traffic. An American journalist pleading guilty today to acting as a foreign agent of China, as intelligence agencies from the United States and its allies warn Beijing is increasingly using online recruitment tactics to obtain sensitive information. NTD's Arlene Richards reports.
Intelligence agencies from the United States and its closest allies are warning that Chinese intelligence services are increasingly using fake recruiters and online job offers to target people with access to sensitive information.
The Chinese Communist Party is the #1 national security threat to the United States.
The warning comes as federal prosecutors pursue a Virginia case involving journalist Thomas Pauken II, who is scheduled to appear in court Thursday for a plea agreement hearing on allegations that he acted as an unregistered agent for China. According to court documents, prosecutors allege that Pauken worked with individuals linked to China's intelligence apparatus and sought to obtain information from a U.S. government employee. Authorities say he prepared reports for Chinese contacts and attempted to cultivate access to government information. Investigators claim Pauken confessed during voluntary FBI interviews that his activities formed part of a conspiracy to obtain classified information from the United States government. The Joint Security Bulletin warns that Chinese intelligence officers increasingly pose as recruiters, consultants, or researchers online, offering paid assignments that can gradually evolve into requests for sensitive or classified information. Targets include military personnel, government employees, think tank researchers, academics, and journalists.
When individuals either leave the military or leave the different intelligence agencies, they're looking for opportunities to try to either recruit these individuals or gain some type of intelligence.
Officials say the warning reflects growing concern that China is combining traditional human intelligence operations with online recruitment tactics to obtain political, military, and economic information from Western countries.
The Chinese Communist Party will stop at nothing to try to garner any type of intelligence or classified information that they can of our secrets.
Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And worth mentioning, Pauken is scheduled to be sentenced on September 1st and faces a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison. And today marks the 37th anniversary of the June 4th Tiananmen Square massacre. Chinese troops used tanks and machine guns to crush pro-democracy demonstrations, killing thousands of people. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports on the commemorations, including a newly released archive of exclusive photographs shedding light on a chapter of history the Chinese Communist Party has long sought to erase.
For 37 years, the CCP has suppressed the truth, labeling the Tiananmen Square protests a counter-revolutionary riot. The newly uncovered photo archive was captured by an official photographer who witnessed the events firsthand. Before his passing, he entrusted the long-hidden film to the Epoch Times for public release. They comprise over 2,000 color and black and white photos. Fulfilling the photographer's final wish, the Epoch Times is publishing the images in installments to honor the victims and remind the world of the regime's atrocities. In response to the release, CCP authorities have reportedly begun harassing and threatening individuals suspected of involvement, including both Chinese and U.S. citizens. Around the world, commemorations are being held in remembrance of those who lost their lives. The Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation is holding a candlelight vigil in Washington, D.C. to honor those killed during the massacre. Other events are being held in Germany, Taiwan, and Canada. Human Rights Watch reports that similar events are planned in more than 30 cities across 7 countries. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the world remembers those who gathered to demand democratic reforms and accountability, adding that no amount of censorship can erase the past. But efforts to suppress remembrance continue in both mainland China and Hong Kong. A performance artist in Hong Kong yesterday tried to honor the victims of the brutal repression, but was quickly stopped by police. The latest sign of the city's shrinking freedom of expression. Hong Kong was for decades the only place in China where a large-scale public commemoration of the massacre was held. And China is barring relatives of victims of the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre from visiting their loved ones' graves on the anniversary. Amnesty International called the move heartless and said it reflects an escalating effort to suppress the remembrance of the fateful day. The Tiananmen Mothers Group says it's the first time in more than 3 decades authorities have prevented members from visiting their loved ones' graves and holding their annual memorial at Beijing's Wan'an Cemetery. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Public commemorations of the Tiananmen Square crackdown are taking place in overseas cities. Lit candles line the windows of the U.S. consulate in Hong Kong. That happened as Hong Kong police stepped up security to prevent any commemoration at or near a park where a massive candlelight vigil lit up the night every year until a clampdown following major pro-democracy protests in 2019. Writing on his Facebook page, Taiwan President Lai Ching-te said a truly great country should not, quote, blindly believe in military might or engage in militarism. He added, quote, I sincerely hope that China can face up to the June 4th incident of 37 years ago, acknowledge the truth, soothe the pain, and open the door to reconciliation and dialogue. FIFA makes a last-minute rule change for World Cup fans. Why reusable water bottles will no longer be allowed inside stadiums. More after this break. Don't go away.
This land, our America, built on hard work, determination, and grit. Sometimes the days run long, but hope, it never runs out, even when the food does, for America's veterans, working parents, even kids. Because in every corner of every town, even yours, millions of hard-working neighbors are facing a hunger crisis, many for the very first time. In this land of plenty, affording food shouldn't require second jobs and third shifts or choosing between your groceries and bills. Today, you can help change that. Call or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, less than 63 cents a day, to help every neighbor get the food they urgently need. Because taking care of each other is what makes America strong. We're Feeding America, not just a name, but an action. Working with over 250 local food banks like the ones in your community. And demand is soaring.
You go to the grocery store, you spend $100, and $100 is a new $20 bill.
Even with 2 full-time jobs, it's hard to make ends meet.
These are tough times, but when we stand together, we become the very best of a strong America. Please call or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org. Just $19 a month can feed a family today. And your first gift can double an impact. Plus, we'll send you this free canvas bag as a reminder of the hope you're delivering.
When it comes down to it, it's about taking care of your family first and the loved ones that you need to provide for.
Because you're not just giving food, you're nourishing what's next for neighbors across the nation. You're feeding America. Call or go online today to helpfeedingamerica.org, and your gift can double an impact.
Introducing the Quest Wise Soothing Herbal Eye Patches.
It comes with 30 pairs and can be used to help combat tired and strained eyes. The natural herbal formula provides a cooling, minty, and refreshing effect that stimulates natural tears and awakens your tired eyes. Placing the eye patches around your eyes helps to reduce dryness and massages acupuncture points. They can be worn while reading, studying, using electronics, and provide hours of long-lasting relief.
Eyes forward. Don't drive distracted.
A truck-driving preacher helped stop an alleged kidnapping attempt in South Carolina. He also caught view of the woman as she ran for her life and the alleged kidnapper on his rig dashboard camera. The incident took place last Friday in Aiken County, South Carolina. Anthony J. Moore was driving a route about 20 miles from the Georgia border. A woman comes into view running at the side of the road and crosses in front of his truck. A man in the car swerves as he follows her. The woman then flees in the opposite direction, her hands cuffed behind her back. She later told the authorities the man had pretended to be a police officer, put her in handcuffs and in the back of his car. She also said he took her phone and social security card. She said she'd managed to escape when he went to fetch something from the trunk of the car. Authorities arrested the man in one count, each of kidnapping and impersonation of a law enforcement officer. The truck driver, who is also a pastor, said it was a special assignment from God, that life needed to be saved. Several employees were injured on an aircraft at Frankfurt Airport when the landing gear of a parked Boeing jet collapsed. Only crew members and ground staff were on board at the time. The Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner was parked at a gate waiting for passengers to board when the incident took place. The front tip of the plane crashed to the ground with crew members and ground staff on board. The plane was scheduled to fly to Los Angeles, but the flight was later canceled. According to flight tracking website Flight Radar 24, the plane is about 1 year old. German airline Lufthansa said several employees were injured and an investigation is underway. Fans at the World Cup will not be allowed to bring reusable water bottles to games due to safety concerns. FIFA making a last-minute change to its stadium code of conduct. Soccer's governing body had originally permitted empty, transparent, reusable plastic bottles inside stadiums. Bottles, cups, jars, cans, and other items are also prohibited to prevent the risk of injury if thrown. The move comes as temperatures of 78 to 82 degrees are expected at a few venues, raising heat and dehydration concerns. FIFA said it was taking measures to deal with weather conditions. The U.S., Canada, and Mexico are hosting this summer's World Cup. The 48-team tournament will run from June 11th to July 19th. Thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. We're taking a short break, but we'll be back with more news. And remember, NTD Evening News is at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific.